This is probably gonna be one of the hardest videos that I've ever done. I'm literally walking on a virtual minefield here.
And here I thought that my violence in video games video was hard to write. In my review of Ride to Hell Retribution, I said that the game had a misogynistic view of women. One person said they were hoping that I wasn't jumping on the sexism and gaming bandwagon and how if something is misogynistic, it's also misandric and whatnot. I replied to clear up any confusion that me stating that the game was misogynistic was not a criticism but an observation, and that I was going to do a video on sexism and gaming, which 6 people thumbs up, and that's enough for me to produce a video on the subject. Is there sexism when it comes to gaming? It's one of those questions that you can say yes, but not for the reasons others would have you believe. But you can also say no, as there are female gamers, there are female protagonists, and there are male gamers welcoming female gamers into their fold with open arms. Developers are taking great strides in making games more appealing to women by adding more female protagonists, or giving the option to having customizable female avatars.
Like my Our Video Games Are and Violence in Games, this is a topic that deserves its own well thought out video instead of a rambling, because it's a really sensitive topic right now, even more so than violence in video games.
I hinted at doing this video a few times as a lot of people have been wanting to see my take on the subject. I had planned on making it at the end of 2014, but my old computer died on me, setting back any plans I had for it by several weeks. The original document was saved to an external hard drive, so there was no loss to it. But upon realizing that I had hit 10 pages and was still only in the beginning stages of the script, I decided to use what I already had for notes and rewrote the script to break it up into 4 parts. Now, you can't talk about sexism in gaming without bringing up Anita Sarkeesian and modern-day feminism. I'll bring up feminism first, which is an equal rights movement to seek equal opportunities in education and employment for women, and I'll mostly be talking about the Western feminist movement. It's broken into 3 waves. The first wave being the suffrage movement, giving women the right to vote in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The second wave focused on the women's liberation movement of the 1960s, which was a fight for equal rights for women and to liberate them from discrimination. We are currently in the third wave, which is a continuation of the second wave and fixing the failures of that.
There's nothing wrong with feminism at its core. Everyone deserves equal rights. But there are just some people in the movement that have taken it to levels that it should not have gone to.
There's a lot of criticism of the third wave, such as a lack of cohesion as it has no one objective. The first wave dealt with getting the right to vote. The second dealt with equal opportunity for education and employment, and ending the legal discrimination of gender. The third wave does not have a goal but focuses on gender violence, reproductive rights, reclaiming derogatory terms, rape, and other topics such as motherhood, or things considered girly, the sexualization of women and pornography. The third wave has come under other criticism due to the rise of extreme radical feminists who operate under the hypothesis that there's a patriarchy and an overall conspiracy to keep women oppressed and asserting male supremacy. I want to make something perfectly clear as crystal as I possibly can. I am not against feminism at all. I am against extremists or any kind that, when given a fair slice of the pie, only try to take more of it for themselves by guilting you into giving them more. And just because someone disagrees with some of these extreme radical feminists, that does not mean you are against feminists. And that does not mean you are a misogynist. And I want you to keep in mind that I'll be using the phrase extreme radical feminists a lot, because I don't want to use the term feminazis, nor do I want to put extreme radical feminists into the same category as feminists who truly stand for equality, and not the preferential treatment of their gender by demonizing the other gender. In fact, feminists who believe in the true equality for all have been calling themselves humanists, because they do not want to be associated with the extremists, because those people have given feminists a bad name. I am not against any sort of movement at all. I'm just looking at all this from a realistic, feet-on-the-ground perspective, not from some idealized, utopia-centric vision of the future where dreams come true.
And these are the people who are generally the loudest and most unreasonable. And the sad thing is, they're hurting their own cause because no one's going to take them seriously.
And that logic applies to anything. Just say gun control and you'll hear someone yell and scream about how the government gonna take our guns. Is anyone going to take that person seriously? No, because they're acting like a maniac, and people are going to look at that person and think gun control is a good thing because they don't want that person who is yelling and screaming about gun control to have a gun, because they're afraid that person might snap and go on a shooting spree. Another example I'll give you, and it's a personal one. I've been doing this YouTube thing for nearly 4 years, and I've gotten comments from people who've thrown a tantrum, insulted me, and whatever, whenever I said a game they like sucked. Do they think they're going to be taken seriously? Because I know I'm not going to take them seriously. More than likely, I'm going to ignore them. But if they're respectful and reasonably disagree, I'll engage in a discussion with them. See what I'm getting at here? If you're rude, crass, and unreasonable, you will be ignored, and any cause you're supporting will be ignored. There's this one YouTube extreme radical feminist, Rebecca Watson, who said that if a male atheist does not call a woman the C word on YouTube, that his balls will shrivel up and form into a mangina. That was the first 16 seconds of her video where she asks for donations to help blood cancer research to help the organization Light the Night.
I hope that Light the Night reprimanded that woman for doing that. That was unprofessional to a staggering degree. And I don't care who you are. You don't make a video asking for donations and start out that way.
I see these extreme radical feminists as women who never grew out of that rebellious teenage stage of development, and while they tackle serious subjects, they will also talk about other subjects in a very man-hating way. Such as some extreme radical feminists have gone on record saying that all men are rapists. And that is an extremely sexist statement, and it's a very misandristic statement as well. But then they'll throw the word misogyny around as if it was some sort of shield when they get called out on their bullshit, and playing themselves as the victim to sexism when in fact they were the person spouting sexist statement in the first place and someone told them to knock it off. I am not hating on feminists. I've talked to some pretty cool ones here on YouTube and carried on very decent conversations, and we agreed upon a lot of things. In fact, some of these feminists do their very best to try and separate themselves from the women who label themselves as feminists when in reality they just hate men, referring to themselves as humanists instead as they want equality for all genders. Misandry often goes unnoticed due to our society's portrayal of men and the way boys are raised as they enter adulthood. A boy will be told to suck it up and be a man when he's upset. Bottling up those emotions is one of the reasons why men live shorter lives than women, because all that stress of bottling up their emotions causes an early grave.
I find it funny that extreme radical feminists will go on about the inequality and oppression of women. But if you look at the inequality of men, it's insane.
There's a video of a couple doing an experiment in public. The guy is being verbally, mentally, and physically abusive to his girlfriend. The second he got physically abusive, people responded, threatening to call the cops and overall protecting the woman. Sometime later, same couple, same place, but the roles are reversed. The woman is being verbally, mentally, and physically abusive, and you know what the people around them did? They did nothing. Even worse, they were laughing. At the end of the video, it said that 46% of abuse in relationships is towards the man. Divorce and custody cases have been described as men's slaughterhouses because men are evicted from their own homes, ripped away from their children against the wishes of the child. When they can't stretch their paychecks to cover 2 households, they're called deadbeats and will be thrown in jail for the inability to pay alimony or child support because the amounts to pay were set way too high. Men are also 9 times more likely to go to jail than a woman for committing the same crime, and will also receive harsher sentences up to being put to death.
Does any of that sound equal to you? Of course not. Sexism is a two-way street. It's just that sexism against women gets more press than sexism against men.
Which brings me to Anita Sarkeesian, who is an extreme radical feminist who has really gotten herself a lot of, well, I'd call it infamy, and I'll be honest. I don't want to bring her up. I don't want to mention her, but she's become the face of this sexism and gaming movement, and I don't want to mention her because she's generally disliked by the entire internet population. She really catapulted herself to fame with her Tropes vs. Women in Video Games Kickstarter, and the still in production series of videos that are a result of said Kickstarter. When Anita made a video to promote her Kickstarter, the metaphorical shit hit the fan. Male gamers took to Twitter, sending rape and death threats, telling her to go back to the kitchen, and I just hung my head in disappointment. 1. It's not funny. And 2, which is more important, you're proving her right before she even made the videos. I've always been a supporter of the phrase, you rage, you lose. When someone is giving an opinion or opens a discussion, if you rage and insult them for what they have to say, you prove them correct as you defeat your own argument by looking irrational. If you disagree with someone, be civil about it, as you then have a greater chance of your side of the argument being heard, understood, and taken into consideration, and possibly trumping your opponent's arguments instead of being ignored. While Anita is an extreme radical feminist, she presents all her arguments in a very rational and well thought out way and is polite when presenting her arguments. On the surface, anyway. When you really take into consideration and think about how she words her sentences, it's very insulting towards men. And the things she says are on par with crazy UFO conspiracy theorists.
Now, as much as I don't want to, I am going to be using Anita Sarkeesian as a talking point here because she's established herself as the face of extreme radical feminist social justice warriors.
If you're unfamiliar with who Anita Sarkeesian is, she's from Canada, where she holds a bachelor's in communication studies and a master's in social and political thought. She had started a Kickstarter so that way she could make her Tropes vs. Women series of videos, and I think it was only supposed to span 5 videos, but now she plans on doing 12 videos, of which only 6 are out. It took her close to a year to produce the first video, and she's missed all her Kickstarter deadlines, and the things she promised to the people that backed her haven't gotten what were promised. She was originally asking for $6,000 but got $150,000. She has been frequently called a scammer and a charlatan by most of the gaming community. The Kickstarter was originally started around June 2012, and it took her until March 2013 to make their first video. Even though I said that there's 6 videos, 3 of them are part of one subject and 2 are part of another, possibly making the count only 3 full videos. She said that she loves video games and that they've been a part of her life since she was a little girl. But however, there was a video that was leaked where she said that she did not like video games but would like to play them, which created a shitstorm. However, I think the people who talked about Anita not being a gamer were taking what she said out of context. From the way she described it, it sounds like she doesn't like extremely violent and bloody games, and she did make a top 10 non-violent games video, so she could be more into cutesy platformers like Mario games.
I'll be honest with you. I don't blame people for thinking that. You start a Kickstarter, get $150,000, and you don't produce anything for 9 months, and you miss all your Kickstarter goals? Yeah, people are probably pretty justified in calling you a scam artist.
Anita wasn't even that well known until her Kickstarter announcement, where those who dislike her and yet follow her, yeah, the internet is a weird place where people will follow someone they hate when they should just ignore that person, shared and spread her video around the internet because they didn't like her, which in turn got her a lot of publicity. She has become a monster that cannot be fed, a monster that gamers who do not like her created. If you disagree, search your feelings, you know it to be true. If people just ignored her, she would not have the voice that she has now, and would only have been known in her own little circle. But because she got so much negative attention, she used it to her advantage, and we all know that mainstream media loves reporting on anything negative, because negativity brings in more money than anything positive. Since the first video, she has gotten a lot of notoriety among the media because she's portraying video games and gamers negatively, and the media just loves that. She's gotten a lot of harassment, and I do not condone anyone to do that. But when people who legitimately criticize her, like myself, she calls it harassment. And if her video series was so important to her, then why hasn't she finished it yet? Are making appearances at conventions and speaking to large crowds and being on TV more important to her than her video series, which she puts very little to absolutely no effort into? And she plans on making 2 more video series as well, in addition to the Tropes vs. Women series, and she plans on doing those alongside of it. She's proven that she can't stick to deadlines. Why open up a new candy bar before finishing the current one? And the only reason why she's doing 2 more series on video games is because she knows she struck a gold mine. Just ignore her and she'll go away. I've watched only a few of her videos, but I do not recommend that anyone else should because they're so full of misandry. She obviously hates men and cherry picks everything she can find and twists it around to suit her purposes. She omits anything that would defeat her argument as well. She often presents her opinion as actual facts and really doesn't have any proof to back them up. If she does provide proof, then it's someone else's opinion she's passing off as fact. It's nothing that was actually researched, but since it was written by a feminist, it coincides with her ideals, and that's all the evidence she needs.
And that's the problem with social justice warriors. They present their own opinions as facts, or they purposely misinterpret things, or they just flat out make stuff up so this way it fulfills their own agenda.
Anita has no knowledge of the creative process. She's never made a character or a world that a character would be in. Even that game idea she created, it's pretty much the Disney Mulan movie in video game form. So even her own ideas aren't even hers. But I'll be honest, if she were to go ahead and make her idea for a game a reality, I'd give it a shot. She said in her Damsel in Distress video that the damsel is often a prize, which makes the woman an object of desire. First off, if you immediately go for that logic that a woman is a prize to be won, ignoring all context, then you do not have a very high opinion of women to begin with. Secondly, she brings up something called the subject-object dichotomy. Feminists will often bring up the subject-object dichotomy, where subjects act and objects are acted upon, reasoning that men act and women are acted upon. However, it's actually called the subject-object problem. Dichotomy is when you split a whole object into two non-overlapping parts. They are jointly exhaustive where everything must belong to one part or the other, and they are mutually exclusive where nothing can belong simultaneously to both parts. For example, dividing the human race into men and women. The human race is a whole object, while male and female are part of the whole, but they are kept separate. Also, extreme radical feminists really bastardize the original concept. The original subject-object problem isn't that subjects act and objects are acted upon, it's that subjects observe and objects are observed. Now you may be wondering, what's the difference? Well, act and observe are completely different verbs. When you act, you do something. When you observe, you watch something.
The subject-object problem is a philosophical issue of how we all relate to each other through our experiences. Everyone's a subject and everyone's an object. Right now, you people watching me are the subjects and I am the object. And also, I am a subject talking about an object.
But that doesn't stop the social justice warriors when it comes to sexism. The more they can keep it separate, the more they can work towards their goal, which is preferential treatment under the guise of equality. If they can keep things separated even when they're equal, they can bitch about inequality to get that preferential treatment. For example, Anita brings up that a woman in distress is only in distress because of the damsel in distress trope, which portrays women as weak and in need of rescue, saying that she needs rescuing because it depowered her gender to empower the male gender in a male power fantasy. But when she says that when a male character is in distress, that it's not because of his gender, but leaves it at that with no further explanation. She criticized Spelunky for being able to swap out the female character with a dog, and that the game was saying that women are on par with dogs, but not saying anything about how the character can be swapped out with a guy as well. I can apply the same logic that the game is putting men on the same level as dogs. If she's quick to put a woman on the same level as a dog, then she doesn't have a high opinion of women, because she does not apply the same logic to the rescuable male character. She complains about throwing the girl, knocking her out, and using her as a weapon. But you can do the same thing with the dog and male character. You can obviously see the problem in her logic. It's perfectly okay for there to be violence against a dog or a man, but not okay for a woman.
We see so much violence against men in video games. Leon Kennedy can get beheaded with a chainsaw in Resident Evil 4, and no one bats an eye. But if a female game character gets so much as knocked out, everyone loses their minds.
This should be common sense. If you're against violence against women, but not against violence against men, then you're a hypocrite. You cannot want preferential treatment for your gender when both sides are equally abused. Yeah, in the past, these arguments would have had more weight to them because women were often portrayed as victims and gaming was very male-dominated. It still is, but more on that later. But there's been great strides in equality in how women are portrayed in video games, such as Commander Shepard can be played as either male or female and everything is pretty much the same. But that doesn't stop Anita from calling FemShep a Miss Man character, where she's just a female version of an already established male character because she thinks that male is the default gender. So even if she talks about Samus Aran, one of gaming's first and greatest female characters, she'll probably just call her a man with boobs or something of that nature. Or she'll reference Other M, where every fan of the series has said that the game was a betrayal to the character. She's brought up that the female Koopaling can only be identified as female because of her lipstick, bow, and pink shell, saying that the male characters are more interesting in design. However, that logic is flawed, at great levels. You see, the characters are not human. How would you be able to identify a non-human female character without a gender identifier?
It's a lose-lose situation right there. Don't include a gender identifier, then they complain about lack of female representation. If you do include a gender identifier, then they say that character's only trait is its gender. What?
This push for equality in gaming is only causing more problems than it can solve. Because what's happening is that extreme radical feminists who don't play video games are cherry-picking things to nitpick and blow out of proportion and twist it around to suit their needs. This causes more damage because they continue to point out the differences between men and women. They solidify gender stereotypes where there may have been none to begin with. Or they point out something that no one would have ever noticed. Or maybe no one ever cared because it's trivial and pointless to make a big deal of. Honestly, so what if a female character has pink on? Is it wrong for a female to like the color pink now? Who cares if she has large hoop earrings or is wearing a dress? And don't say that it perpetuates a female gender stereotype because male have gender stereotypes as well. Men have baseball caps just as much as women have dresses. So it's hypocritical to be for gender equality, but only focus on one gender but not the other. It's a double standard is what it is, and the extreme radical feminists like to say that sexism against men doesn't exist, and that men aren't sexualized at all and there are no male gender stereotypes.
You want to know how stupid of an argument gender stereotyping is? Joel from The Last of Us is a stereotype of men because he has a beard. And as we all know, all men have beards.
Men can be and are sexualized. Look at Marcus Phoenix with his huge rippling muscles and abs you can grate cheese on. Look at Solid Snake with his rugged good looks, which is the stereotype for attractive American men, at least seen by Japanese people. Or look at Raiden with his soft pretty boy features, which is a stereotype of what the Japanese think an attractive man should look like. Which brings us to how social justice warriors look at how women are portrayed, complaining about Bayonetta wearing a tight bodysuit and being in provocative poses. But they don't bat an eye when Raiden was completely naked in Metal Gear Solid 2. Which brings me to a theory. It's a pretty out there theory, but maybe, just maybe, these extreme radical feminists who hate seeing fictitious women in revealing clothing just are not comfortable with who they really are. Think about it. They don't think that a man can be sexually objectified even when the sexual objectification of a man is quite obvious. It's possible that they're just not attracted to men, but yet have a problem with women being portrayed the same way. So possibly they're attracted to the women and they're in denial about it. Or they may have body image issues where they don't like the way they look. So seeing something attractive makes them reflect upon themselves and makes them feel bad about themselves. Men have these issues too, so it's not just women. And men who have these issues will act the same way. I've seen ugly guys complain about the sexualization of men because they're not comfortable with who they are. I may be fat, ugly, and balding at an alarming rate, but the difference between me and those guys is that I've accepted this. I'm comfortable in my own skin, so I'm not going to look at Michelangelo's David and get wound up in a tizzy and say that it sexualizes men when it doesn't, because it's a fantastic piece of art. Because not being comfortable with how a character or anything is portrayed and wanting it changed or outright abolished would be censoring art, and that's wrong.
Hey, I'll admit, it is a way out there theory and not a very well thought out one either. But usually people who are uncomfortable with who they really are against what brings out who they really are. Like all those super Christian Republicans against gay marriage. Later on, you find them getting a blowjob from a guy in an airport bathroom.
And circling back to the damsel in distress for a moment, how is a guy that's in distress not in distress because of his gender? What's the stereotype of men that's most prevalent in media? It's that men are stupid. Look at almost every famous TV dad. Al Bundy, Homer Simpson, Peter Griffin, Tim Taylor from Home Improvement, the dads from Fairly Odd Parents and The Amazing World of Gumball. All of them are stupid while their wives are the smarter of the two. So a guy in distress could be in his predicament because he's stupid. The social justice warriors won't have that because to them, it doesn't exist. There's no way a man can be portrayed negatively. And the problem with all of this, all of it, is that social justice warriors will point out the problem, but they don't offer any solution to it. Or any solution they do offer is akin to putting a band-aid on a severed limb. You know what Anita's solution to the damsel in distress trope was? To get rid of it entirely. Unfortunately, that's not going to work. Sure, a lot of games don't use it as much as they did in the past, but it's something that's as old as time itself and people are still going to use it. Saying not to use it because you think it depowers and victimizes women, you're only victimizing and depowering yourself because you don't have the ability to rise above what you find offensive because only you find it offensive when other people do not.
You know what we call that? Intolerance. You don't have to accept something. It can still piss you off, but you tolerate it because the world does not revolve around you.
And that's the problem. They want things their way, but aren't offering an explanation as to how they want it. Saying that you don't want a female character in a revealing outfit, but not offering a different outfit for the character to wear, you're not helping. And saying that you don't want the female character to wear anything revealing or to look like an object of desire, but since these social justice warriors find everything offensive, or at least not saying what they don't find offensive, that starts to leave very little options. It's gotten to the point where people like Anita want female characters to be dressed like this. They want them in a burqa. That way the woman can't be objectified nor can she be sexualized. Or when they say that a female character is just a female version of a male character without offering any way to alleviate that concern is just complaining to complain. And here's the next part. There's a difference between being sexualized and sexual empowerment. In this current wave of feminism, there's the anti-sex group who are against the sexualization of women. Anything that can be deemed will 100% of the time be deemed as sexual objectification, and to them that's wrong. But there's the group who are for sexual empowerment, where they feel empowered because they feel sexy. However, they are the quieter group, while the anti-sex who bitch about patriarchy are the loudest. So let's look at Bayonetta. She is extremely attractive and wears tight clothes. However, she's empowered by it. She's strong and confident because she's being herself. It's part of her personality.
But apparently, Bayonetta doesn't count as a strong female character who plays by her own rules because of the way she dresses. And you know what? I don't see a problem with it, and it is not because I'm a guy. It's because I'm able to look past the clothing and see the character for who she really is.
Sexual empowerment is a sense of ownership. The woman owns her sexuality and thrives in it. Sexual objectification is defined as a powerless, passive giving control to someone else. It's obvious that Bayonetta owns her shit with the way she presents herself, the way she walks and talks. Is the problem because she was created by a man? What if she was the same way but created by a woman? Would it be fine then? Is it okay for a woman to create a Bayonetta-like character but not a man? If that's so, that's sexist, because they're saying that a man can't write a good female character. To complain about a character's clothing is very superficial and extremely shallow, and again, they don't offer any fixes to a problem that isn't there. From a practical standpoint, for someone who is jumping about and doing flips and overall being very acrobatic as they move about would need something that's flexible and skin tight. Why do you think gymnasts wear spandex? Are gymnasts now sexist because they wear skin tight outfits? It allows them to be flexible and the clothing won't get caught on anything. Now let's look at Samus. While wearing a power suit, she's still very quick and agile, but without it, she wears the Zero suit, which gives her increased flexibility, letting her be more agile and faster. Putting them side by side, Samus is more serious and conservative than Bayonetta. She's quieter and more reserved. Bayonetta is more apt to make quips and jokes. She has a sense of fashion and knows how to look good in any situation, and lives by the phrase, if you got it, flaunt it. She's very proud of her beauty and uses it to her advantage, and the social justice warriors complaining about that is absolutely silly, because they're complaining about a fictional character, especially when there are women in real life that are like Bayonetta personality-wise. I have a female friend that was like Bayonetta until she got married and had twins.
To say that video games can affect our culture negatively is erroneous, because video games are a reflection of our culture.
Looking at Grand Theft Auto 5, there are people like Trevor, People who are assholes and don't care about anything and do whatever they want. You can't look at a game and say that it's going to affect people negatively when it's a proven factor that it's not going to. Going back to my violence in video games video, where there are studies that prove that violent games do not cause violent behavior, and in fact a recent study shows that violent behavior has gone down because of the increase of popularity of video games. But that doesn't stop Jack Thompson from speaking out against violent games despite evidence proving him completely wrong. Every time a violent shooting takes place and the mainstream media starts demonizing video games, gaming media rushes to the defense and starts flashing all the studies that prove video games are not to blame. And what does that have to do with misogyny and how women are treated in video games? Because Anita Sarkeesian and her Social Justice League are doing the exact same thing that Jack Thompson has been doing. They're just replacing the word violence with misogyny. If games cannot cause violence in people, then they cannot cause misogyny. Now, I did say in my video about violent games that I was more apt to side with the study that said that violent games can cause violent behavior in some, but not others. But it really varies from person to person as we're all different psychologically, and some people can be more susceptible to how they interpret various forms of media.
And with that said, I don't think that video games can cause misogyny, because misogyny, by definition, is a hatred of women. I don't think anyone has ever played a game where they slapped a woman and then somehow decided that they hate women.
Additionally, social justice warriors will point out a lack of female characters in video games. However, there are a lot of female characters in video games, so they can't complain about a lack of female characters, or say that they aren't represented properly. In fact, here's a reality check. There's Samus from Metroid, Jill Valentine, Rebecca Chambers, Claire Redfield, Ada Wong, and Shiva Alamar from Resident Evil, Lightning, Tifa, Ares, Yuna, Riku, Pain, Lulu, Yuffie, Terra, Celeste, Fran, Renoa, Quistis, Selphie, Garnet from the Final Fantasy series, Sea Viper, Chun-Li, Cammy, Ingrid, Sakura, Armika, Elena, Ibuki, Makoto, Juri, Blair from Street Fighter, Gum, Mew, Boogie and Q from Jet Set Radio, Lara Croft from Tomb Raider, all the female Pokemon trainers, Athena, Mai, King, Blue Mary, Kula, Angel, Yuri, Chizuru, Elizabeth, Mullen, Vice, Mature, and Leona from King of Fighters, Jade from Beyond Good and Evil, Bayonetta and John from Bayonetta, Naruto from Heavenly Sword, Shell and GLaDOS from Portal, Cortana from Halo, Midna from Legend of Zelda, Joanna Dark from Perfect Dark, Cosmos and Shion from Xenosaga, Dizzy, Amelia, Jam, May, and Aino from Guilty Gear, Aqua from Kingdom Hearts, Ava, Sniper Wolf, Meryl, and the boss from the Metal Gear series, Elizabeth from Bioshock Infinite, Amaterasu from Okami, Sylvanas Windrunner from World of Warcraft. Let's not forget about any game where you make your own character, and that applies for male and female gamers. So next time you have someone saying that women aren't represented in video games, kindly tell them to learn about video games and pick up a controller and play.
So, are females represented in games? Well, according to all the ones that I just listed off, I would say so, because that's only a small fraction of all the female characters in video games.
Now, a lot of the characters I listed off are from Japanese games, which is a different culture all on its own, and for extreme radical feminists to criticize it and act like it affects our culture is wrong. We have our own. Additionally, Japan has a completely different view of feminism and gender, so if you're trying to make a change in Japanese games to suit your liking, you'll have to go to Japan, get on your soapbox, and preach your gospel there. But here's the problem with doing that. It's a waste of time because Japan is a very xenophobic society. They like how their culture is because it works for them. A lot of game companies there have been pretty much staying the course when it comes to their development because they know that their people will buy their games. Which brings me to a question. Why are all these extreme radical feminists so adamant about gender equality in America, where they have the ability to get any job that a man can get and are not oppressed in any way whatsoever and can express themselves in any way they want without repercussion, and are fixated on rape culture where they continue to broaden its definition to near laughable states, where if a guy compliments a woman or even glances at one because they wandered into his line of sight, he's considered a potential rapist by extreme radical feminists. I will not deny that there's a problem when it comes to how we view rape, because there are people who blame or don't believe the victim.
But apparently I can't say anything because I'm a privileged white male. I'm the enemy. But have you stopped and noticed that a lot of these extreme radical feminists are privileged white women?
And I have a legitimate question for those extreme radical feminists. Why are you so concerned with gender equality in video games in America, when there are true, real-life gender inequality problems in other places of the world, like the Middle East, for example, where it really is a patriarchy and women are oppressed, to the point where they can't go outside unless accompanied by a man? Shouldn't you be dedicating more time and resources to trying to change that area of the world to better the rights of women there? It's rather sad that you don't show any cause or concern for the women of those societies who are truly oppressed, and are more concerned with how fictional women in fictional worlds are represented. Which brings up another point. Video games are fictional worlds, and yet people like Anita Sarkeesian will call them male power fantasies. Granted, I will say that a lot of AAA developed titles feature males as the protagonists, so I can see where that logic can come from, but women also have their own power fantasies as well. In fact, you can argue that women have more power fantasy media than men do, just not in video game form. Most female power fantasies are books or movies, like the Twilight series or the Hunger Games, who feature female protagonists. Granted, Bella from Twilight is probably a terrible example, but Kat from Hunger Games is a better one.
You can argue that more women would play more games if there was more female protagonists, but that's probably more wishful thinking than anything.
Let me run this logic by you. A woman says that she would play video games if there were more female protagonists. But if that's the case, then that person never had any intention of playing games in the first place. It's a really superficial reason. It should not matter what the avatar you're playing as is. If the game is fun with a good story, then that's all that should really matter. And even if there's a game with a female character, what are the chances that person is going to know about it, let alone play it? Obviously, if they don't play video games because of lack of female protagonists, then they don't have any interest in video games in general. But that probably wouldn't even stop the cherry picking either. In one of Anita's videos, The Women as Background Decorations, she points out in one of the Hitman games that players are encouraged to victimize the women in a strip club. But the reality is you're supposed to sneak past them, and when you do attack them, you're penalized for it, meaning you are discouraged from attacking them. Really, you can look up any video that disproves Anita's viewpoints and proves how horribly wrong she is, and that her viewpoint is absolutely ridiculous as it has no basis in any sort of reality.
And the sad thing about all this is, Anita has become the face of extreme radical feminists. She thinks that she speaks for all women when she doesn't. And when she's challenged, she likes to call it harassment and misogyny. No, scrutiny is not harassment. She just likes to have one-sided arguments.
And that's a problem. Anita loves to have one-sided arguments, so that no one can challenge her viewpoint. She has all the comments and ratings on her videos disabled so that way no one can challenge her, and she blocks people who challenge her opinion on Twitter and refuses to accept any challenge or debate. And that's not just her, that's any social justice warrior. They shut down like spoiled brats when their viewpoints are challenged and are effectively wrong because they're not getting their way. I've had Polygon delete my comments on their articles a couple times because I challenged their viewpoint, and they ignore any and all evidence that proves them wrong. This is called confirmation bias, where they have a belief and look for evidence that supports it and then disregard anything that disproves their belief. There are female gamers out there that dislike Anita and her cronies, because they are the true sexists. They victimize their own gender on a constant basis by taking things out of context. All the while they demonize men for their own goals of preferential treatment, like Anita wanting the new Mirror's Edge game to have a special control option for women so it's easier for them to play the game. And she completely omits any game where you create your own character, making you the central figure of the story, like in the Elder Scrolls games. You could be a male or female character in those games. Video games have become a lot more inclusive for both genders and have taken great strides in that aspect. Just look at BioWare. You can have a homosexual shepherd of either gender. That's pretty inclusive if you ask me.
So no, there is no sexism against women in video games, at least not any more than there is in any other form of media. But the thing is, like I said earlier, sexism is a two-way street. There's sexism against men probably just as much as there is against women. It just doesn't get the attention that sexism against women gets.
As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of stupid TV dads out there, but there's also musclehead dude bro characters, and men that are savages or hardened warriors, and the list goes on. There's a lot of gender stereotypes for men, and a lot of them are extremely cliche to the point of annoyance. Even if a male character is the hero, as of lately, he's just a boring, growly voiced character with no personality, or they're just an asshole. That's pretty sexist if you ask me. The male character being either stupid or an asshole. That's a negative stereotype against men right there. But you know why it doesn't get the publicity that sexism against women get? Because men don't care that they're being portrayed in a negative light in fictional media. At least I don't care. And I've never heard a guy complaining about stereotypes of men. There's other things to concern yourself with other than being stereotyped. It's like when Mexicans were complaining about the Taco Bell dog being an offensive representation of Mexican people. Really? You have nothing better to do with your time? When I worked at a call center in Florida, we had a program where we handled American Greetings customer service for their online e-cards. Well, someone called up and was complaining about an e-card called Make Love the Democratic Way, where it had all these Democrat politicians in bondage gear and whatnot. The woman said that it wasn't right, and if the company did something like that, they should do it for all political parties. I asked if she wanted me to cancel her account, and she didn't even have one, essentially making it a waste of my time. Later on during the day, a guy calls up complaining about the same card. He said that he and his wife printed out copies of the card, and were going to stand outside one of the stores and protest and ask what I thought about it.
I told the guy to bring a lunch, stop wasting my time, and then I hung up on his ass because I wasn't going to deal with that crap anymore. That episode of South Park with the little Romanian girls was right. People have it so good here in America that they'll protest anything.
I understand that if you have a cause, but audit it. Everything you do towards your cause, you should audit to make sure that you're not wasting your time by doing nothing. You have people who raise awareness, which is a form of doing nothing. If someone got into a car accident and I started pointing at it and screaming at people to look, I'm raising awareness, but I'm not doing anything constructive to help that person. Sure, there's been some awareness to this whole sexism controversy in gaming, but nothing's been done, nor is anything going to be done, because it's not really an issue. The reason why that nothing is going to be done is because gaming as a medium is naturally progressing to be all-inclusive. It took books and movies a long time to get to where they are, but they've also been around a lot longer than video games. While video games are one of the biggest media businesses out there, it's also one of the youngest. They haven't been around as long as other forms of media, so it's going to take time for it to mature like the others did, to be as inclusive as they are now. There's still going to be sexism, probably more unintentional than anything else, and maybe some that's using it in a joking manner. And if they are using it in a joking way, learn to laugh. But I don't think that'll be done purposely to cause harm like the social justice warriors would want you to believe.
So now we're going to talk about if the gaming industry, publishers, developers, and mainstream gaming media have a responsibility to avoid sexism.
Unlike earlier, where I pretty much dismissed extreme radical feminist ideals, where they have opinions on things they know nothing about, and the more ignorant they are, the more opinions they have on what they don't know. But now I'm going to gravitate away from extreme radical feminists. But that does not mean I'm leaving social justice warriors alone just yet. That part is coming soon enough, and I'll be covering the response from the gaming industry. Now, I will not deny Anita's videos have caused some people to think, and while she spills man-hating bile under the guise of feminism, she has, on the rare occasion, brought up a valid point or two. Like, one valid point was that in one of the Scribblenauts games there was only one female character out of a slew of male characters, each other having their own different theme, which does alienate any younger female gamers wanting to play a female character with a unique theme, instead of a default one. I do not think that the lack of more female characters in that game was sexist, but possibly an oversight and not done purposely in some wild conspiracy theory to disparage women from games like Anita's videos would try to have you believe. Because as I said before, if you really listen to how she words her sentences, It really sounds like she's trying to peddle some conspiracy theory that video games are trying to oppress women.
Developers and publishers have acknowledged Anita's videos, but they don't really seem to care, and it's for a reason that I'll get into in a little bit.
Sure, Anita got the Ambassador's Award, and she didn't even thank the two guys that presented it to her, nor did she thank any male developers, but only thanked her female audience. But only some developers said that they were looking at treating female characters better, of which I think there was only one, but then made a statement of returning to the status quo, and that developer was Rockstar. But does the gaming industry have an obligation for equality and treating fictional female characters better? Well, I would say not more than any other industry or form of art. With that said, yes, the gaming industry has a lot of male employees, because more men are interested in video games. That's a true statistic. Whenever you see the developers at E3, it's mostly men. When you go to a GameStop, it's mostly men. When you read or watch reviews, they're mostly men. The gaming industry is a sausage fest, but so is the auto industry, but no one is complaining about that. And there's women out there that like cars just as much as men. Where's the social justice warriors when it comes to wanting gender equality in the automotive industry?
Social justice warriors will often ask how come there's not more female game developers, like it's some great philosophical question. Well, maybe it's more of a simple answer, because maybe, just maybe, there aren't that many women interested in game development.
There's no conspiracy to keep women out of game development, and there's nothing stopping a woman who likes games and wants to be part of the process from doing it. It's a matter of not being interested in it. For example, when I was in college for animation and game design, my first girlfriend, who's an artist, decided to take the same course as I was. I was ahead of her when she attended the same college, and she quit just under a year because she did not like it. My second girlfriend was also an artist, and she went to the same college for the same thing and quit around a year and a half because she did not like it. Both of them were gamers too, but they decided that making games just wasn't for them, because they didn't like their hobby of being artists, which they loved, turning into a job that they knew that they weren't going to like. And it's not an easy job either. I had a teacher who worked on Descent 2 and Duke Nukem Time to Kill and Land of the Babes. He was a very hard person to get an A from. He wanted detail. If you made a toaster in 3D, every single piece needed to be detailed. A lot of teachers were in those industries and knew exactly what they wanted to see from their students, because that's what the industry required. It's almost discouraging, especially when you look at how much people get laid off and studios closing left and right, needing to pick up and move every few years because they got laid off after a game was released and had to go to another state to work in a different studio.
If you got the talent, experience, and you have exactly what they're looking for, you have a very good chance of getting in. But if you don't, and like in the story I'm about to tell you, you are going to be SOL.
There was this girl that I used to watch on DeviantArt before she banned me from her page. The short version is that she expected her watchers to donate to a charity that no one knew about, because she never told anyone and was being really nasty about it, and I called her out on it. Well, she is a huge fan of Mass Effect and loves BioWare. She applied for BioWare and was rejected because her art portfolio was absolutely terrible. It was full of anime style stuff and fan art and even some anthropomorphic art. BioWare just didn't turn her down, they shot her down. In a professional way, though. They said that while she has talent, it's only for what she was doing, which is what they're not looking for and never will look for. The industry is looking for artists who can make almost photorealistic images from a pencil. A lot of students that I went to school with in the same courses had this very fantasized way of how their life would turn out. Some thought they would go to Japan and work for a famous animation or game studio. Some went so far as to believe that they would start their own studio in Japan. Some people thought that they would start their own studio here in America, which is grounded a little more in reality, but you're not going to do so right out of college. You're going to take whatever it is you can get, even if it's some no-name place that shuts down before their one and only product is ever completed, because you need the experience, and when you move up to bigger and better things, and maybe eventually to your own studio.
If you think you're going to be the next Shigeru Miyamoto, you're not. You're going to be a cog in the machine. I'm sorry to say that, but that is the harsh reality of it.
And the gaming industry does hire female game developers, and in this case I'm broadening the term developer, meaning artist, music composer, writer, and programmer. I don't know the rate of how many they hire, but they do get hired, and I will admit that there are a lot more male game developers than female. And while the extreme radical feminists and other social justice warriors want more female developers, you cannot make them pop out of thin air. Do they not think that game studios wouldn't hire female employees if they had the talent to work there? There's no reason not to hire them if they have the right stuff. A female developer may be passed over in favor for a male developer if that person had more experience though, but that's any job. If you worked in retail for 5 years, you'll be considered for a retail job over someone who's never done it before. But the reason why there aren't that many female game developers is because there just aren't that many women interested in game development. At least not as many that social justice warriors or extreme radical feminists would like there to be. But it's getting there. Slowly, but it's getting there. You can't force women to become game developers if they don't want to. Just like you can't force a guy to be a construction worker if he doesn't want to. You can't force people to do a job they don't want to. You have to let them go into the field that they want to be in.
I'm not going to say that women won't be or aren't interested in game development, but the thing is, video games are still a young industry, especially when compared to a lot of the others. And keep this in mind. Women were not allowed to act until the 1660s. Before that, all female characters were portrayed by men.
The reason why I brought that up is because back in those days, things were a lot more oppressive towards women where there were very little job options for them, if any. Now there's lots of women actors, doctors, cops, and the list goes on. But those are professions that have been around a lot longer than game development. We do not live in some weird primitive society where men run everything with an iron fist. Yes, there are more men politicians, but there's women politicians too. Sarah Palin governed Alaska and was John McCain's running mate for vice president, and Hillary Clinton ran for president in Democrat primaries. Women can become leaders of countries too. South Korea, Chile, Costa Rica, and Argentina, just to name a few. Those countries have female presidents currently in office at time of writing. So yes, it can happen here in America too. But really my point is this: certain jobs just appeal to certain genders more than others. Gaming and game development just appeals more to males than females. For every 7 male gamers, there's 1 female gamer. Granted, that's changing now, and I'm glad that it is, but you cannot force change, although some reports say that it's about 50-50 if you include Facebook games and games on smartphones. I'm not going to put a game controller in someone's hand who is not interested in video games and force them to play, nor would I force somebody into a job that they don't want to do, or they are not qualified to do for the sake of equality.
I feel that the gaming industry, like any other industry out there, is required to hire the most capable person for the job at hand, which brings me to the question of wages. Female game developers get paid 14% less than male game developers, which has me asking, what are the parameters that claim is based around?
I've done some digging. There's been the claim that women make 77 cents for every dollar that a man makes, and that's according to the U.S. Census Bureau that the Huffington Post reported on, but the Census Bureau report is no longer available. However, according to topmanagementdegrees.com, they say that the wage gap is true if you do not account for occupation, positions, education, job tenure, and hours worked per week, which actually closes the wage gap to women making 95 cents for every dollar that a man makes. According to them, expectations and gender stereotypes lead men to choose professions in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which are higher paying jobs than the ones that women choose, which are usually in healthcare and education, which pay less. In 10 of the more lucrative college majors, men greatly outweigh women, and in 10 of the less lucrative college majors, women outweigh men. So when I hear someone say that women make less, I ask what are the parameters. In the case of game development, what are the specifics? Is a fresh out of college female getting 14% less than a male who's been in the industry for 10 years? What if a male and female just graduated and went to different schools where the male graduated from a very renowned school and the girl didn't? Maybe they went to the same school and the male student had a better grade point average than the female. These are the questions that no one asks or people with agendas omit because it hurts their stance. If the male and female had the exact same amount of experience in the field and had the same education from the same school and the same grade point average and their portfolios were equal in quality and the female still got paid less, I would say that's not fair, because it's not. But to say that someone fresh from college should get the same amount of pay that someone who's been in the field for many years, that's not fair to the person who's been working in the field longer.
How would you feel if you were working at a job for 10 years, you got multiple raises and bonuses for all the great work you did, but then some new hire who just graduated from college is getting the same salary as you? you would be and should be rightfully pissed off.
Women also face more career disruptions than men. There's maternity leave, which women take more than men take paternity leave, and working mothers find it harder to advance than working fathers. It's all about how much you sacrifice and your choices that you make, but women are and have been making the move for higher paying jobs, and good for them. I want them to. They're breaking these gender stereotypes and setting new standards for women. And when you take into account like the Civil Rights Act being signed into law in 1964, we've come a very long way in 51 years compared to the very slow, if any, progress of the centuries before that. Now, should the gaming industry cater to women by making games that appeal to them? It's a question we can say yes to, but here's the problem. As mentioned earlier, male gamers outnumber female gamers 7 to 1. Gaming is still a very male-orientated demographic, so if there were to be games that cater to a female demographic, it needs to be done slowly and subtly. They can't just plop down a whole bunch of games with female characters because that can cause oversaturation, and therefore a disinterest in those games. Earlier, I said that things were not going to change for gaming as they are now because the medium is going towards that all-inclusive demographic already. But the reason why there won't be a fast dramatic change like how the social justice warriors want is because of one simple reason. EA has gone on record saying that games that are targeted towards women just don't sell very well.
Think of it this way. You're a game developer. Do you want to make a game for 7 guys or 1 girl? It's basically asking the question of, do you want to make $420 or $60? It's basic economics. You need to yield enough profit so you can make your overhead and stay in business.
The budgets for games are already overinflated as they are. The gaming industry can't just jump into the foray of female-orientated games and expect to turn a profit with a 7 to 1 statistic. That's why the developers have been easing into being inclusive of the female demographic. Even Nintendo has been gravitating that way. In Super Mario 3D World, you can play as Peach. You can play as a female Toadette in Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker. And as stated beforehand, BioWare has been making games where the lead character can easily be played by a male or female, heterosexual or homosexual. Mascot-orientated games like Ratchet & Clank or Mario are going to be harder to have female playable characters, because the mascot is a guy. But Sly started to. There were small sections of Sly 3 where you could play as Carmelita, and Sly 4 gave her a pretty large role and a lot more playtime, because she played a much bigger role than her previous roles in the series. And Sonic is going to be impossible because people, male and female, bitch about his games no matter what Sega does, so I'm not even going to include that series. And there are developers who are sticking to their guns about keeping characters as they are, like Don't Nod, who are making the episodic Life is Strange game. Every publisher wanted the characters to be switched to males instead of females, except for Square Enix, who did not care.
Well, I'm glad that the character stayed female, but I can understand where the publishers are coming from. Do you want to make money from 7 people or 1 person?
I myself am not interested in Life is Strange, not because the characters are female, but because the premise doesn't seem interesting to me at all. Even if the characters were male, I would not be interested. But I do think that publishers should have more confidence in publishing newer and different types of games instead of the same copy and paste garbage that we get every year. And publishers should not have any creative input on the game series that they do not own. Their job is to advertise the game and get it into players' hands. And when it comes to advertising, they could do a much better job. Like with the Mass Effect games, they could have shown the female Shepard more often. I think she was only in a trailer one time and it was for the 3rd game. They should have showcased her more. When Call of Duty Advanced Warfare was running its commercials, you got a first-person view of what was happening and everything you're supposed to be able to do. In one part, the guy sees a woman and she's coming onto him, only for her to be a goat. I see nothing wrong with it. The game series is targeted towards a male demographic, so it's going to have things in it that cater to men. I know that there's women who play Call of Duty too, but again, 7 guys to 1 girl. Know your demographic, that's economics. Women's advertising works the same way. Look at the 50 Shades of Grey movie trailer. You cannot tell me that there's anything there that caters to men. I never read 50 Shades of Grey, but it's being advertised as a female power fantasy. It's a woman who finds a guy who is not only devoted to her, but will give her anything and everything she wants. The guy is Scrooge McDuck wealthy, has influential power, he's good looking, and from the trailer looks like he knows where the heaven for vaginas is. And the movie was released today, Valentine's Day, a day where men bend over backwards for their girlfriends or wives.
Are you going to sit there and tell me that nobody on this planet would like a partner like that? Of course not. Everyone wants their 3 wishes from a genie because it's human nature to want your desires fulfilled. Why do you think the lottery and gambling is such a successful business?
And I can just as easily say that 50 Shades of Grey portrays men negatively. perpetuating the male gender stereotype that all men are extremely horny and disgustingly perverted. But I'm not going to do that, because I know that I am not the target demographic for that movie, and I'm not going to twist things around and purposely misinterpret things to suit my own personal agenda. Because I have no agenda. I'm just applying common sense to this whole controversial fiasco. Now, I don't see why developers cannot include options for female avatars in games that are targeted towards men, because women do play those games as well. Like when Assassin's Creed Unity was shown off. All 4 characters were male, and it was met with questions why they were all male characters, and Ubisoft said something along the lines of that it would have been too hard to do, and that it would have caused delays and was past the game's budget. That seems like a reasonable explanation. But when you think about it, why didn't they plan for 2 of the 4 characters to be female from the start instead of going with an all-male cast? It would have been the same amount of money to build, texture, rig, animate, and voice the characters. I think this was an oversight on their part. They probably did not think about it, and considering how the game turned out upon its release, it's obvious that it was an oversight on their part. Like when Nintendo did not include same-sex marriage in Tomodachi Life. Yeah, it was a huge controversy, mostly due in part to Nintendo PR dropping the ball. But you were able to work around it by making a female character look like a male. But some game developers, there was this one that Jim Sterling mentioned in an episode of the Jimquisition, I forgot the name of the developer and the game, but they made it a free-to-play game on Steam, and they told him that it wasn't very hard to make a female playable character.
So if an indie developer of a free-to-play game was able to include female playable characters, then your AAA developers do not have an excuse for not including female avatars.
But there's games like Skullgirls where it's an all-female cast and people love it. It's gotten a lot of recognition, and I would say if there's a fighting game targeted towards women, Skullgirls would definitely fall into that category. Even the story is, or at least can be seen as, targeted towards a female demographic. But true success would be a game that caters to all demographics. Reason being is that everyone would buy it. In that aspect, casual games on mobile devices, love them or hate them, cater to everyone. They're simple little time wasters that everyone seems to enjoy, like Angry Birds, a series that has had just as much success as Minecraft, which is another game that everyone loves. And even though Steve is the player's default avatar, it can be changed to a female character if the player chooses. Some people have gone as far as modding other games and swapping out sprites or models to play as female characters. I had a mod for Sonic Generations that allowed you to play as Blaze. There was a father that swapped out Link for Zelda in the original Zelda game so that his daughter can play as a female protagonist. The gaming community has taken it upon itself to mod games so they can have female avatars if there are none. Granted, the gaming community probably should not need to do that, but it shows that there's an interest in it. But again, this is something that would have been more of a valid topic many years ago, because it's rather pointless to bring it up as an issue now and use older games as a platform to build an argument on.
You can't point to the 1985 Super Mario Bros. And say that it's sexist and depowers women because you're a male that's rescuing a female and that it negatively affects our culture. Because right now, there's a lot of games that allow you to play as a female character.
So I don't believe that developers have an obligation to cater to a female audience because they're already doing it. But that doesn't mean they should stop, they should definitely keep going. But in cases like Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed Unity, they could have done better by planning ahead more. Even if the series has become a copy and paste job in recent times. Maybe the publishers who do all the advertising can do a better job at showing off the female avatars in the games where you can play as either gender. Like how the Skyrim ads always showed the guy in them when the Dragonborn character can be either gender. Or when Mass Effect mostly showed male Shepard in advertisements. But I think that's all coming in due time. But what about gaming-related websites? Well, they do hire female writers, but I don't think they're doing a really good job at what they do, and they handled the Gamergate controversy horribly, and that's going to be the next topic. I was going to include them in the social justice warriors topic, but I feel that because they are part of the gaming industry as a whole, they should be included in this one. There's 3 websites that I frequent: Kotaku, Joystick, and Polygon. First, I'll talk about Joystick. I feel that they tried to stay neutral when this whole sexism and gaming controversy broke out. They reported on it, but they were pretty neutral on it, at least it seemed that way to me. Because all the articles that I read didn't seem to take a side and they were pretty quick to bow out of it. So they became my go-to site for gaming-related news, as did Games Radar because they stayed completely out of it, or at least I never saw them talk about it.
At first, Kotaku was leading the charge, but only for the reins of the social justice wagon to be taken over by Polygon.
Kotaku seemed to have dropped all their social justice warrior nonsense, which must have been due to the backlash they were getting from their audience. or they may have just moved it over to a different site within the Gawker network. However, Polygon hasn't even stopped, and they'll bring up Gamergate and Anita Sarkeesian any chance they get. They continue to demonize their own audience, which is the problem I have with Polygon lately. They've been trying to make you feel guilty that you're a male gamer, like their Bayonetta 2 review where they took major issue with Bayonetta's design and held it against the game and gave it a lower score because of it. And the thing is, Bayonetta was designed by a woman, so I don't know what to say there. So even if a woman creates a sexually empowered woman, it's not okay. The social justice warriors will just omit that the character was made by a woman. Polygon has gotten so bad with their social justice warrior bullshit that there's a disclaimer in their articles where the thoughts of the author do not represent the thoughts of Polygon. How stupid do they think we are? The author of the article works for Polygon. Of course it represents the thoughts of Polygon. It's not like when you watch a commentary made by the actors or directors of a movie and they express their personal opinions, and the film studio says those thoughts are not a representation of them, because those actors and directors don't work specifically for that studio. They are contracted by the studio.
If you work specifically for one company, you are a representation of that company. So anything you do or say is a reflection upon that company. And if you do something incredibly stupid, the company goes ahead and rectifies what you did, which means making a public apology and firing you.
I think that the whole controversy of sexism in gaming should have been something that writers of gaming websites should have kept their personal opinions to themselves, and let their viewers decide what to think for themselves by presenting all the information objectively, only because it's a very sensitive subject. But instead they were telling people what to think. They were trying to make male gamers feel guilty for being male gamers. I'm not saying that the writers for these gaming media outlets should not express their own personal opinions, but I do not think that they should have posted it on these sites that they work for, but kept it to their own personal social media sites, like Facebook or Twitter. And I say that they should have kept it to their own personal outlets and not their work is because they really fanned the flames, and they kept pouring gasoline on a grease fire. It made their websites look horrible and really ruined their reputations. I would leave comments that they were making the situation worse and worse the more they reported on it, which would in turn cause more harassment against people like Anita Sarkeesian, who does not deserve to be harassed. She does deserve to be criticized for her sexist remarks, but she would spin anything about her around and capitalize on the harassment and threats she got, which in turn gaming media would report on again.
So I do think that the gaming media does share the responsibility of continuing to create a problem where there was originally none. And the irony of me talking about this subject on YouTube is not lost on me.
Yes, I review and talk about gaming here, but while I'm independent like most YouTubers, I am still a part of gaming media, but I'm not even a blip on the radar. I'm not a social justice warrior, and I have no agenda here other than trying to bridge a gap that's been created by extreme radical feminists and social justice warriors, and the people who side with them. I'm just applying common sense to all of this because things have gotten so black and white that people are lost in the dark and blinded by the light. Like when Christina Hoff Sommers, also known as the Factual Feminist, made a video saying that she didn't see any sexism in video games, and that there's no reason for game developers to cater to females because she saw games as something that's meant for males. She reasoned that asking for developers to cater to a female demographic would be like asking shows like The View or Cosmopolitan magazine to cater to men, saying that each gender has its own form of media that caters to them. And she was right. There are forms of media that cater to each gender. But that does not mean that they can't try to appeal to a wider demographic, as it would mean more sales. She dismissed the claims of Anita Sarkeesian and quoted a study where as video games surged in popularity, crime has gone down, and repeated what we all knew, that there is no correlation between violent games and violent crimes, and that these people who call themselves feminist critics cherry-pick and twist everything around to suit their own needs. But what really set me off was that Polygon writer Colin Campbell wrote an article that completely dismissed what Sommers had said, and he parroted what Sarkeesian has said, whereas Sarkeesian just parrots the opinions of those that think like her.
But you may be thinking that there's something that the gaming industry can do. Well, look. The car is already on the road, and it's heading in the direction that you want it to go in, and it's going there as fast as it can. And as much as you want it to go faster, it's just not going to go that fast.
The problem is that social justice warriors and extreme radical feminists aren't doing anything to solve the problem. and the reason why they can't or just aren't doing anything to solve the problem is because it doesn't exist. Even if it did, it's easily rectifiable. They said that a majority of game developers are men and therefore are making games for men, and there's a lack of female developers. You see where I'm going here, right? Instead of criticizing the industry for a lack of women in it and lack of games featuring female protagonists, why not start your own game development studio? Isn't that a much better solution than sitting on your butt and complaining about nothing? Honestly, why aren't all these extreme radical feminists not starting their own game development studios? If they're holding onto this belief that there's some sort of conspiracy in the gaming industry to keep women oppressed and are demanding change, why aren't they being the change? Why don't they go to school for game design? There's nothing stopping them from doing it. If anyone is standing in their way, it's themselves. There's nothing stopping them from creating a Kickstarter and hiring a couple of programmers if they're unwilling or unable to go to college for it. I don't understand how the social justice warrior mindset works. They point out some trivial thing that bothers them and only them, then proceed to complain about it as if it doesn't change, the world is going to end, like Jack Thompson and his crusade against violent games.
I'm not being sarcastic here. If this situation is so important to you, get off your ass and make a game based around your terms and your terms alone. I'm pretty sure that Polygon will give you a 10 out of 10. Maybe 11 out of 10 if it's an Xbox exclusive.
The gaming industry does have a responsibility to be more inclusive, and if the AAA market isn't going to do it, then it's up to the smaller developers to be a part of the change. And if not them, then someone should step up and start their own studio. But if a game obviously isn't targeted towards you like Grand Theft Auto 5, then don't buy it. Even Rockstar said that after Target and Kmart, which I didn't know still existed, in Australia pulled it from shelves following the complaints of social justice warriors, where they complained about the game's depiction of women. However, like Jim Sterling said, GTA 5 was pulled because of its infamy, as people are able to go into Target and buy movies and other games that feature the same amount of violent content. As I said earlier, it's more of a matter of people being intolerant and wanting preferential treatment. Gaming media repeating what social justice warriors have been saying, that game developers need to treat female characters better, is on par with politicians like Joe Biden saying that the gaming industry needs to take responsibility for its depiction of violence in their games. It's buying into the myth that violent games cause violent behavior, which is not true, as studies have shown. And again, I point out, if the gaming industry has an obligation to depict women better, then they have an obligation to depict men better.
You see what happens when you start picking and choosing things that you deem acceptable and not? You start censoring things. And if video games are an art form, then you're censoring art and freedom of expression.
While I do think that the gaming industry has a responsibility to be more inclusive, because it creates more interest in games and generates more revenue, and I'm sure that it being the right thing to do is in there somewhere, I don't think they have an obligation to treat characters in the games with any sort of preferential treatment because of their gender or even sexual orientation. If a developer wants to depict a woman getting slapped, that's their right to do so. Same if they want to show a male getting kicked in the dick. To say that it's okay to show violence against a man but not a woman only perpetuates the stereotype that women are the weaker gender and need constant protecting, which continues to separate us into groups instead of bringing us together on equal grounds. Gaming is a form of art, and saying that you shouldn't show violence towards women or even men because it makes you uncomfortable would be censorship. Gaming media also has a responsibility, and that's not to sensationalize the controversies that happen, regardless if they truly believe that the bile that spews from social justice warriors, their own or otherwise, by picking a side and refusing to listen to the other side, is only making things worse. If gaming media is going to report on stuff like this, then they should not try to make you feel ashamed of liking a game because of the content inside of it. I myself would not say that I've chosen a side, or at least I'm trying not to sound like I have. I would say that I'm more in the middle at the moment, and I'm just looking at it all from a common sense point of view with all the actual evidence that's out there. Because if studies show that games cannot affect your behavior, then they cannot cause someone to become a misogynist or sexist against women.
And now we talk about the big one. The culmination of this entire controversy. The reaction of gamers and Gamergate.
Here we go. This is something that's been building up for a long time until it finally imploded upon itself and has torn the gaming community apart. I want to say that things are starting to rebuild itself, but the ground seems rather unstable. Now, I already covered how Anita Sarkeesian started a Kickstarter to discuss sexism in gaming, and that's where the whole thing started. Anita wasn't really liked by some YouTubers for her extreme radical feminist views, but she got infamous because those who did not like her gave her all the free publicity that she could ever dream of, causing her Kickstarter to go viral. Then things went silent for 9 months until she posted her first video in the series, which didn't cause much of a problem. It got viewed and a lot of people who made responses to her disagreed. Then the second video was made, same response. By the third video, people started to respond with a little hostility. The fourth video was met with about the same amount of hostility as the third. Then the fifth video, which was Women as Background Decorations Part 2, was released, and nothing happened. It seemed like no one cared and paid little attention to her. The video was not getting the views that others did. In fact, each of her videos was getting less and less views, and the fifth set a record for the lowest views. I know, because I saw it.
What happens next is a series of events that happen very close to each other in a massive explosion, so I'm gonna list them off in the order that I saw them in.
A few days after she posted that fifth video, Anita published a picture on Twitter where she says that she doesn't normally share the harassment or threats that she gets. In the picture is a series of tweets where someone is saying sexual things, threats of violence, and rape. Gaming websites went nuts all over this, and reposted her Women as Background Decorations Part 2 video that she uploaded in the same article discussing the threatening nature of the tweets, and how she fled her home in fear of her own safety, and all that caused the video to explode with views. It got more views in more time than the previous one did, and still does have more views. Now, there is a theory that Anita sent herself those tweets. Someone had analyzed that no one was logged in, and the screenshot was taken 12 seconds after the final tweet. You can do a Google search on it and easily find it. I haven't seen anyone talk about it, so I think it was dismissed as a conspiracy theory, and even if she did do it, she's smart enough to not file a phony police report, as some websites have confirmed that they talked to her local police department and said that the case was handed over to the FBI Cyber Division. It's totally possible that she had a friend take the screenshot for her after giving the harasser's name, and that person wasn't logged in, as once you search for something on Twitter and then go to someone's Twitter page, the search bar clears.
But then we have Zoe Quinn, and I brought this up in a video beforehand. Why does anyone care about her?
Zoe Quinn is a female game developer who made a free game called Depression Quest, although from what I've seen, it's more of a PowerPoint presentation than a game. Some people noted that gaming media gave the game more press and praise than it deserved. What happened next was that her ex-boyfriend had written a blog post, stating that Zoe had started sexual relationships with a supposed 5 gaming website writers, one of them being Nathan Grayson from Kotaku, which led people to saying that he wrote a positive article for the game, although editor-in-chief Stephen Tolio confirmed the relationship, but said that Grayson never wrote anything before the relationship. But Grayson did write an article about her 2 months before the relationship began. Now I ask you, who cares? Do you honestly care that Quinn had a sexual relationship with 5 game writers? She made a free-to-play interactive slideshow. What's the big deal? If it got so much praise and press, how come I never heard about it until the whole Gamergate controversy? Maybe I'm desensitized from watching all these women that show up on the Maury Povich show who slept with 20 guys and can't find the father of their child. But I don't care if Zoe slept with an alleged 5 people. It's her life and she can do whatever she wants. Just because someone aired out her dirty laundry, it's not a big deal, and it was blown out of so much proportion that there was really no need for the reaction that it got.
Now I know that may have sounded a little anti-Gamergate, but is an indie female developer sleeping with a game reviewer really that big of a deal? Especially when we have all these AAA publishers paying for good reviews and flagging bad ones?
Gamergate has been a long time coming. However, for it to have been successful, it needed leadership, which it didn't have. It was a hashtag on Twitter, something that you can't control. But I'm not going to say that the reactions that Anita Sarkeesian, Brianna Wu, and Zoe Quinn are a result of misogyny, because I don't believe that they are the targets of misogyny. I think that the harassment they got is a result of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The boiling pot spilled over and they got burned. And that's not fair to call the gaming community misogynistic because they were the targets of harassment by males. But at least Brianna Wu and Zoe Quinn decided to do something about the harassment. Zoe Quinn started an anti-bullying site, and Brianna Wu started a legal defense fund for women who have been targets of Gamergate. I applaud them for their efforts, but I am going to add an addendum to this in a bit, so if you have a comment about it, I suggest holding off until I add that addendum. However, I condemn Anita Sarkeesian for her actions as she continues to demonize the entirety of male gamers, and she continues to use the harassment against her as a stepladder to further her own career. She capitalizes on anything she can twist into negativity towards herself or any woman to bring attention to herself. so that she can profit from it, and I don't believe that her Feminist Frequency is a non-profit organization, only calling it that so she doesn't have to pay taxes on her income. I also applaud all the gamers who have been standing up and speaking out against Anita's claims of misogyny, a word that she uses so much that I don't think she even knows the definition of, because she's created a shitstorm while she laughs all the way to the bank.
So many gamers have been absolutely disgusted with the industry's reaction, essentially making them feel bad for the games that they buy and enjoy. There was even a fight that broke out between a YouTuber and a game developer.
Tim Schafer had seen Anita's videos and said that the gaming industry really needed to do better with the way it treats women. And JonTron had spoken out against the videos, saying that Anita is portraying men as savages, and that he didn't like it because he's not a savage. Tim responded in a way that made JonTron look like he was attacking and harassing him, which caused all of Tim's fans to attack and harass JonTron. It was quickly rectified and Tim and John settled their differences and cleared the air. But that should give you a glimpse at how much of a problem this whole controversy has caused. Gamers are saying that nothing needs to be changed because the industry is heading towards that all-inclusive demographic. Male YouTubers like Boogie1098, Angry Joe, and Alpha Mega Sin have spoken about this before, and they say that it's not a male against female problem. It's not about misogyny, it's just a toxicity problem. But more on that in a bit, because I want to address an article about how the word gamer is dying. The article sent a lot of people into a rage. The article was talking about how the toxicity was killing the gamer moniker. I think that the article could have been written a lot better and more gamer-friendly. And that's really the issue here. No one has taken into account the feelings of gamers. Everyone just looks at them like these basement-dwelling nerds who hate women because of the stereotype that they're losers.
Really? How insulting is it for someone who knows absolutely nothing on games to dismiss it as something for nerdy losers? Does that mean Vin Diesel, an avid gamer and D&D player, is a nerdy loser too?
That was really the reason why I started this. No one was really taking into account how gamers were feeling about being called misogynistic, basement-dwelling, nerdy losers on a regular basis. Sam Whittle of Gawker affiliate Valley Wag said that Gamergate proves that nerds need to be constantly shamed and degraded into submission and to bring back bullying. That doesn't solve an issue. That just throws more gas onto the fire. Biddle eventually said that the tweets were jokes and apologized, but only in response to the car manufacturer Mercedes pulling its ads from Gawker and Adobe requesting that Gawker take down their logo from their advertiser section because they do not promote bullying. And in a Columbia Journalism review, they said that even though the tweets were jokes, that it's no secret that Gawker is the bully of the internet. Which is pretty true. A lot of gamers were against Kotaku in this whole debacle. Gamers were getting tired of this insulting, snarky hipster attitude that these gaming sites were giving off. So when Gamergate broke out, of course they took a stance against it. People were criticizing them in their comments section to the point where they started moderating it, silencing anything that they didn't like and continuing to parade around the air of superiority, as if they had the upper hand when it came to the whole thing. Unfortunately, they didn't, and I think they decided to bow out of the controversy when it was getting too hot to handle, as Kotaku has gotten more gamer-friendly recently. At least it appears that way.
In the end, I don't think Gamergate actually succeeded, but I don't think it failed either. It was just something that really needed to run its course.
Remember that addendum I mentioned earlier about Brianna Wu and Zoe Quinn? Well, I think that they turned the negativity against them into something positive to benefit others. They should have just kept their mouths shut. I say that because they didn't say anything to make a bad situation better. Zoe Quinn should have just reported the threat she got to the police and said nothing to the press, and she should have just laid low. Brianna Wu should never have said anything on Twitter about Gamergate. If she had never spoke out against Gamergate on Twitter, more than likely, she never would have become a Gamergate target. Gaming media sites should have just let it run its course as well and not comment on it. I was getting so tired of the gaming community tearing itself apart, and when things were starting to settle, someone would come in and throw more fuel on the fire, making it blow up again, which is one of the reasons why I waited until it blew over. Because gamers are very competitive. That's the nature of gaming itself. If gamers aren't competing against computer-controlled opponents, they're competing against each other. Gamers like to win, and I will say that those in the Gamergate movement were persistent, and maybe they did win by default as the gaming media has effectively given up on trying to push the fact that Gamergate and those who support it are a band of misogynistic men who want to keep some non-existent status quo.
But, and this is a big but here, there were some people in the Gamergate movement that, well, for a lack of a better term, were the bad apple that spoiled the barrel.
I'm not going to deny that there were people in the Gamergate movement that were targeting female developers or game article writers and were harassing them, and that's just wrong. Even if they were poking the gorilla with a stick. Because going after these people and sending them threatening or harassing messages only continues to prove people like Anita Sarkeesian right. And I know that none of you want that. You want her to be disproven. So don't do things that would prove her correct. I am not saying that you cannot have an opinion. I am not saying that you cannot have emotions. And I am not saying that you cannot be a miserable prick of an asshole to somebody. But do it intelligently. Don't send Anita Sarkeesian rape and death threats because she's only going to capitalize on it. She benefits from your hatred of her and uses it to her advantage to gain more press. And she continues to demonize you as a male and a gamer. Just ignore her. Don't give her the time of day. If you feel you have the need to say something, then channel it into a reasonable statement, like that you extremely disagree with her thesis and quote the studies that prove that video games do not cause negative behavior.
Look, you guys are gamers. You play games where strategy is the key to winning. And with the way things are going and the way people are playing, gaming as a whole is gonna get the bad ending right now.
I say that because you shouldn't be saying harassing things to Anita Sarkeesian. No, I'm not white knighting. I'm saying that if you harass her, you're only proving her right. You want to prove her wrong, ignore her. Pretend she doesn't exist. She's only getting the attention she gets because of the harassment. And I also say that because I don't think that the gaming community is full of misogynistic people. I do know that there's a lot of trash talking, and I see nothing wrong with that. There's trash talking in regular sports and card games, and I've even seen trash talk in board games. I didn't see anything wrong with trash talk. It can add some much needed comic relief to these intense matches. My friends and I did it all the time in Smash Brothers. And really, if you're going to jump into a game with people, especially people you do not know, where you can talk to each other, you're going to have to develop some thick skin. Gaming is 99% mental, 1% physical. If you can throw your opponent off their game, you're going to do it. Like when I play card games. I used to hate it when people would constantly make that flapping sound with the cards in their hand as it made it difficult to concentrate. Eventually I tuned it out, but you can see where I'm coming from. If someone is trash talking to you, you either ignore it or counter it if you can come up with something witty on the spot. So if a guy says he's going to rape you, tell him that you'd be surprised if he could rape anything with that skin tag he calls a penis.
There was this one time I was playing World of Warcraft. I was in a heroic 5-man dungeon and things were going horrible. Hilarious, but horrible. So this one girl chimes in and she's pretty pissed off and she's yelling at everyone to get their act together. This one guy says, "There's a girl in here?" And she replies with the funniest comeback I've ever heard. She said, "Yeah, and guess who's got the bigger dick?" I was laughing so hard that I just logged out because I could not keep my composure.
We're guys. We say horrible things to each other all the time, but we don't mean it. We joke about it. We bust each other's balls. Although I think that when the media starts making gamers look badly, and I mean really badly, point where Law & Order makes a really bad episode about Gamergate, we can ease up on being the rowdy bunch that we are. I do think that we as gamers need to improve our image just a bit. There is a problem with toxicity, but it's really only a select few out of the bunch. Not all gamers are like that, but it's always the small yet very, very loud minority that gets all the attention. So when the media is reporting on gamers negatively, even when the vast majority of us are saying that we're not all like that, we're ignored. And I would assume that most of the toxicity is coming from the younger crowd, mostly from the prepubescent to teenage years, who probably don't know the ramifications of their actions or are exploring their boundaries in what is and isn't acceptable behavior and are just parroting what they hear on the internet because they thought it was funny. As I said in my violence in video games video, it's more of a parenting issue. I think that some parents should step in and curb their kids' behavior. And the social justice warriors are taking what these kids are doing and are using it in some stupid war so they don't have to feel uncomfortable about something that they were never interested in, even when it never bothered them anyway.
Seriously, what's with people saying that the well is poisoned? The water's a little dirty, but that's why we have filtration systems.
Is the toxicity in the gaming community bad? Yes. But is it a problem? Not really. Considering that there are more problems in the gaming industry, like $60 games having $150 worth of DLC, and none of it is in the $25 season pass, companies releasing unfinished games and apologizing for them only to repeat the process, putting microtransactions for in-game currency so that you can actually progress through a game, a small group of 9-year-olds calling people faggots is the least of our concerns. And sensationalizing this bratty behavior only encourages others to follow, so that way they can see if they can get their own 15 15 minutes of fame. And the media loves it because it's clickbait, and clickbait is how they make their money. They want gamers to be these toxic subhuman spores of goblin flesh, so they can get the views they so desperately crave. That's where the Not Your Shield hashtag came in. Gamers were so tired of getting blamed for things that a very small minority were doing. The gaming media taking these bad apples and claiming that the whole crop was tainted, because it suited their purposes of deflecting all the blame they got that they deserved. So no, I don't believe Gamergate is a misogynistic movement about men trying to keep the status quo by keeping women out of games like how Anita Sarkeesian believes. And the fact that she said that out loud on the Colbert Report and no one said to her, "Wow, that's really crazy that you believe something that stupid," is actually a surprise.
Now, we're going to do a little experiment. I want you to say that sentence out loud. Don't worry, I'll sit here and wait. Now, doesn't that sound crazy?
Seriously, what guy would actually concern himself with trying to keep women out of the gaming industry or from playing video games? Or from there being more female protagonists? That guy who bought 100 Rosalina amiibos just to prevent other people from buying them because he hates the female characters on the Smash Bros. Roster and is the only person I can think of. But obviously that person is crazy himself and stupid for wasting around $1,300. Really, where does this mentality come from? How can someone make this huge jump in logic where just because one game doesn't appeal to women, that all games must be inherently sexist? Granted, that's the perfect example of a straw man argument, taking one thing and creating a similar but different argument to defeat the original one. All because first-person shooters or action games are targeted at men? Yeah, more men play first-person shooters, but women play more RPGs. I remember doing heroics in the Cataclysm expansion of World of Warcraft, and I got matched with 4 female Blood Elves who were in a guild that only consisted of female players. And when it comes to character creations, male players who create female characters rarely make a character slutty. And I mean actually slutty, not a seductive female assassin. That's different because the character isn't a slut, but using her looks to achieve a mission goal. Although I will say that I've seen more women create pretty offensive homosexual male characters. And I used to have a friend that would make really slutty bimbo characters all the time. And it was because he was really immature. And that's how he preferred women to be.
And that guy went on to make a really shitty game. It got greenlit on Steam, but only his friends have recommended it.
I don't think it's fair to demonize an entire group because of a few jerks that are in it. Because the thing is, there's assholes in any group. Look at all the corrupt politicians out there who are in the back pockets of these huge businesses. Or they try to pass stupid laws because it benefits them and them only. I can understand gamers being angry about being seen as savages, because the social justice warriors are labeling them in that way. And honestly, they're the real bullies here. You're demonizing an entire group because of a few rogue members. Although that seems to be the MO for most media and social justice warriors here in America lately. I think that Gamergate was something that was going to happen eventually. At some point, gamers were going to get tired of being labeled negatively, and all that anger just exploded. And when the people who sparked the fire got hit, they in turn responded in a negative fashion as well. It's like poking a lion until it attacks you and you get mad at it for attacking. Look, both sides made some bad choices in all of this, whether they were for it or against it, but I think at the core there was and still is a noble reason. But again, it was just something that needed to blow over, and seems that everyone, except certain people, have learned a lesson and have moved on from what I can say was a conflict that was always going to happen, and it resulted in a stalemate.
Well, this is a fine mess that social justice got us into. So, how do we clean it up?
There's times where you sit there and ask, why don't you just leave things alone? Why is it that you have to try and fix something that isn't broken? You cannot push evolution at all. There's no point in pushing it because all it does is cause horrible mutations, which doesn't make anything better, but makes things worse. And by the time you achieve your goal with all of your experiments, evolution would have created something better. Social justice warriors or extreme radical feminists who don't play games trying to push and force the gaming industry to include more female protagonists and hire more female developers as if there's a sea of female developers to choose from, when the reality is that most women aren't really into game development. There's the gaming media who's eating out of the palms of social justice warriors. If they actually believe that crap, then they're stupid. If they don't, then they're just trying to get clickbait for for profit. They're acting much like Fox News, where they'll say anything stupid for ratings, which has made them a laughingstock. It's the bias and misrepresentation of facts that killed newspapers, and when that leaked over into television, that killed it as well, and now it's killing internet media. Remember Dorito-gate, where Jeff Kiley, or however his name is pronounced, was talking about Halo 4 and had Mountain Dew and Doritos sitting perfectly right next to him in the most obvious product placement ever?
And just so you guys know, I'm completely against product placement.
All the gaming industry needs to do is stay its course when it comes to that all-inclusive demographic, because games are starting to appeal to more and more people, and the gaming industry is taking note of that. Developers will do what needs to be done so they can continue to make games that people will want to play and therefore create returning customers. The gaming industry, much like the movie industry, will exploit patterns that generate the most revenue. Why do you think that Call of Duty has gone on for so long despite it being criticized as continuously becoming more and more stale as the years go on? Or why Skylanders has become such a huge success, causing Disney and Nintendo to follow suit? So the more females that get into gaming will cause the industry to respond to keep them playing games. They do not have a responsibility to treat female characters with preferential treatment, because then there would be no reason to include a female character at all, and the developers would just do a gender swap and have the same things happen to a male character. Developers should not listen to people who don't play video games. If video games are a form of artwork, then you have absolutely no right to interfere with an artist's work, just because you and you alone feel uncomfortable with what's in there. So it's really just a matter of ignoring it because it's not hurting anyone and isn't causing any damage.
Some people are quick to say that ignoring it's a problem and that it needs to be addressed, because ignoring it is on par with ignoring real-life racial, gender, or sexual orientation discrimination. Really? You're really going to go that far?
I've brought this up before in my No Room for Gray video, where people are seeing things in black and white and continue to go from one extreme to the next. Saying that ignoring the problem of gender stereotypes in gaming is like ignoring racism happening on the street when a white guy calling someone a racial slur. How do you make that jump in logic? A damsel in distress in a video game is nowhere near the Westboro Baptist Church's gay bashing at funerals. Recently, Kotaku posted an article about how there's a lot of white main characters and the black characters are often reduced to outdated stereotypes, and complained that having a black character voiced by a white actor was the equivalent to blackface. You want a character, female, black, Hispanic, or whatever, breaking the stereotypes. And when you get that, people complain about how the character is just a white guy on the inside. You cannot facepalm any harder than that. Again, this brings up the lose-lose situation, where if you give people what they want, they still complain. And that's the intolerance here. No one wants to settle for what they're given because it's never good enough, and they refuse to meet anyone halfway. And even when they do get what they want, they still complain about it. So what can game developers do? The answer is simple. Just keep making games. That's all they have to do. Make games, see who buys what, analyze the patterns, then build and market the games around the data collected. Bending over to appease people who don't play games just so they don't have to feel uncomfortable about something that doesn't affect them in their daily lives at all is a bad business model, and will run them into the ground.
That's why I've been saying that they don't need to do anything, because they're already doing it. Patience is a virtue, you know.
Now, the gaming media, on the other hand, really needs to clean up their act. Instead of ignoring the criticism, they spun it to make themselves look like the victim, using every quiver in their arrow to try and make gamers look as bad as they possibly could. The years of building the reputation of gamers, countering mainstream criticism that video games create negative behavior in people with studies that prove otherwise, all of that thrown out. Thrown out to defend themselves from criticism, and it wasn't even that big of a deal initially. When Anita started her videos, they remained neutral, and just reported on when she uploaded a new one, but left it at that. But when the Zoe Quinn affair broke out, they started railing against gamers, like some giant cat was let out of the bag. They turned into Fox News, sensationalizing Gamergate and making gamers look as bad as they possibly could, when they obviously knew that there were only a few bad apples in the bunch, but still chose to raise the orchard, selling out gamers for clickbait and making them look like horrible people to those who know nothing about gaming or gaming culture, which in turn could lead to video games losing their art status here in America, and therefore being prone to government regulation, much like other countries censor or outright ban games they don't like. That can happen here because of the media sensationalizing the few asshole gamers and applying that bad behavior and saying that all gamers are like that when that is not true. There's a petition going around asking Kotaku Kotaku and Polygon to try and bridge the gap they created between them and gamers. I think Kotaku has started on that path, but Polygon still tries to maintain that gap.
In fact, recently, I was banned from Polygon. They claimed that I was trolling, when the reality is I was legitimately criticizing them for their extreme bias against Nintendo and their extreme favoritism towards Microsoft.
I don't really go to Kotaku like I used to, and Polygon has become more of a passing glance lately, because I've been going to the new joystick on Engadget and GamesRadar more, and I've been adding other sites like Destructoid to the list that I check out, and starting to look at smaller sites like the Tanuki for my gaming news. Sites that realize that games are for fun and entertainment, not as a driving force for bias agendas. And lately, you can't tell if articles written on Kotaku are for them or are links to their affiliates, which I find incredibly annoying. I still think that they should apologize, not because they chose a quote-unquote wrong side to be on. I could not care less what stance they took, but I think that they could have handled it a lot better and in a more friendly way than they did. And some of us gamers can stand to improve ourselves a bit as well. There is toxicity in the gaming community without a doubt. I'm not going to say boys will be boys, because some of the behavior is inexcusable and should be curbed because it's mostly younger gamers who are doing this, and the parents should be parenting to correct the bad behavior. They should be seeing what their kids are doing online and checking what they do. There was this one time a female game writer got a threatening message from someone. She found out it was a kid and sent the transcript to his mother, who apologized and said she was going to take care of it. So don't do stupid and dangerous things, because law enforcement is taking note lately and are arresting people for pulling these so-called pranks.
As much as you think you're invincible behind your monitor, you're not. Doing stuff like that will land you in jail, and I know that none of you want that. Unless your goal is to marry someone named Bubba in a prison wedding.
But really, the problem here lies with social justice warriors and extreme radical feminists. And as I stated way back in the beginning, at the core there's nothing wrong with feminism, and like I said in my Violence in Gaming video, there's nothing wrong with social justice at its core either. Everyone should have equal rights regardless of race, gender, or sexual orientation. But there's a line that should not be crossed, because you're crossing into preferential treatment which is not equal. Like the shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, African Americans took to the streets in protests and even riots broke out, claiming racism and that white cops are always shooting to kill African Americans. But what about Christopher Rope, a 17-year-old white teen who was shot by a white cop at his door for holding a Wii remote? Where's the protests and riots for him? Why didn't the news cover his death like they did Michael Brown? And the truth of the matter is, the media was sensationalizing the death of Michael Brown, making it look like a white cop shooting African Americans problem. But that's not true. It's a cops shooting first and asking questions later problem, which affects everyone, not just one specific race. But a fictional female video game character being knocked out and kidnapped is about 1,000 miles away from the ballpark that is real-life cops shooting real-life unarmed civilians. It's really making a mountain out of an anthill here, especially when the gaming industry is already treating female characters better, making more playable female characters and making games that appeal to women. And these people need to not only realize but accept that just because something doesn't appeal to them, that doesn't mean that it doesn't appeal to everyone. That's like me saying that just because I don't like white chocolate, that no one likes white chocolate, and that chocolate manufacturers should stop making white chocolate.
Instead of saying, hey, this isn't for me and moving on with your life, you and a small group of people have to take the really silly route and want something drastically changed because you don't like it. Well, that just means that you're selfish and only care about you.
I know that throughout this whole time I've railed against social justice warriors, but a lot of them just have the silliest reasons for their actions. It's not like they're fighting for equal rights, employment, and education like the civil rights movements. What they're doing now is complaining about how fictional characters are treated and saying that affects our culture negatively. Even though there are a lot of studies that say fictional media doesn't cause negative behavior. The cherry picking and purposely twisting things around and taking them out of context needs to stop, because it hurts your credibility, especially when things are blatantly obvious and is at the bottom of list of concerns. How is Bayonetta higher up on the list of characters that can be considered sexually objectified than the Dead or Alive series, especially the beach volleyball spin-offs? How is it that Nita Sarkeesian hasn't brought up Dead or Alive beach volleyball yet? I know that she will, but you'd think that'd be the first thing she'd talk about because it's a game series where all the female characters are in skimpy swimwear, and their breasts bounce and jiggle when they move, and they make suggestive poses. While Bayonetta, who I do not think is sexually objectified but sexually empowered, is fully clothed, so to speak, and when her clothes disappear to summon monsters, you don't really see anything and it's very brief, unlike Dead or Alive Beach Volleyball where it just rubs it in your face constantly.
And in all out honesty, it's not as bad as some people are making it out to be. Things are improving. It just needs some patience and tolerance.
I don't think that video games or the gaming industry is sexist just because it has more men in the business and more men interested in playing games. And appealing to the majority demographic of gaming is what's going to keep it in business. But as the demographic changes, games will change and the way their marketing will also be changed. So demanding change when it's already happening is redundant, and demanding faster change just isn't going to happen because it can cause monetary damage. And with gaming studios laying off people left and right or shutting down completely, new ventures are going to be extremely risky. So it's wiser to ease into being more inclusive than thunking it down and expecting people to accept it. And the thing is, social justice warriors are actually getting their way, just not at the instantaneous rate they want it in. But social justice warriors and extreme radical feminists need to take that stick that is so firmly wedged up their ass and remove it. Because when you go looking for sexism or racism, you're going to find it. Not because it's actually there, but because you want it to be there. You want it to be there so badly you're reading into things incorrectly and seeing things that aren't there. And even if it is there, one, it's fiction, so what happens in the game isn't actually happening in real life. Two, it's probably, and more than likely, unintentional. And three, even if it was intentional, it's probably for character development, like Edward Norton's character in American History X.
Years ago, it was that games were from the devil to make people into violent Satan worshippers. Nowadays, it's a conspiracy by straight white males to make people homophobic, racist, and sexist. Same shit, different words.
If Anita Sarkeesian wasn't purposely taking things out of context and cherry-picking, then maybe she might have a platform to stand on based on actual facts, instead of the balloon of sensationalism that's soon to pop. She's the flavor of the month, and that's all she'll ever be. We unfortunately do not live in a perfect world where there is no imagery that will make people feel uncomfortable, where we don't have unkind thoughts or think anything negative or fantasize anything. And that's what the social justice warriors want. They want to take away your right to fantasize, which is what makes you human. To continue this war on boys is a waste of time, because taking things out of context to push for equal treatment isn't that. It's a push for preferential treatment, so they don't feel uncomfortable with how fictional characters are treated, which I find silly that their priorities are so out of whack that they're ignoring the real problems of real-world people in favor of fictional ones. They're concerned with the equality of fictional characters. Has it really come down to this? Complaining about fictional characters not being treated equally? I'm all for equality, but what I'm not for is this blatant bullshit propaganda being perpetually paraded around by women who demonize men to push their own selfish agendas. That's not equality, that's fascism. So you made it to the end or skipped to this part. No matter, here's the bonus rant. The reason why I actually wanted to do this part is because one person asked what I expected Zoe Quinn to do, when the whole thing about her relationship with 5 guys in the gaming media was leaked, suggesting that I should have let her be a martyr, which that's the wrong usage of the word, by the way. A martyr is someone who sacrificed for their own beliefs. Quinn being attacked was by a lynch mob for what I feel was no reason. While I did say that she should have just kept her mouth shut until it blew over, I did not mean that she should have been a sacrifice either. But I do believe that what she did do was throw gasoline on the fire by speaking out against Gamergate. Same with the people in gaming media that she had relations with. They too should have stayed silent. Reason being is because no matter what they would have said, the angry mob that was out for blood would have used whatever rope they gave them to hang them. There was nothing they could do or say to make themselves look better. Anything that they would, and in fact did say, only made the situation worse. What Quinn and the rest of gaming media should have done was wait for it all to blow over. Then they could have told their side of the story once everyone had calmed down, because most people would have stopped caring by then. When you're at the center of a controversy, the worst thing you can do is open your mouth while everyone has their sights on you. Bill Cosby hasn't said a word about the allegations brought against him. He shut his mouth and lawyered up. But the problem is, Quinn used that attention to push her own agenda, which I am of the opinion that Anita Sarkeesian was the one who was really using Quinn to fuel her own agenda, which I'll explain later. Even Brianna Wu, who blocked me on Twitter, and I have never had any engagement with her on the service, to my recollection anyway. It wasn't until she decided to throw some gasoline on the fire which brought more attention to herself, and even she tried to keep things going to push her own agenda. Like when she tried to push that Samus Aran being a transgender person due to one of the developers saying that Samus was a new species or something of that nature, essentially twisting something around so she could try and claim a win for transgenders. Years later, the same developer said in an interview when asked about an idea, he said it was about as silly as Samus being a transgender character. I can understand a group of people who lack social status in society, but trying to steal an already established character instead of trying to come up with a new one is just plain lazy and it lacks meaning. The real issue here is social justice and political correctness, which has gotten way out of hand. When Razer took a shot at Apple's new MacBook Pros, which are over-expensive garbage by the way, pointing out the MacBook's lack of an SD card reader and telling Apple to S their D. It was a play on words and people started saying that Razer's tweet was sexist. How was it sexist? They weren't telling a female to suck their dick. Hell, a guy can tell a guy to suck their dick. Is that sexist now? If a girl tells a guy to suck her dick, is that sexist? And before anyone says, oh, women don't say that, yeah, they do. A few weeks a girl that I know did tell me to suck her dick when I proved her wrong on something. But a company, something that does not have a gender, let alone a penis, tells another company that also doesn't have a gender nor a mouth to suck their dick with, isn't sexist. At that point, it's a matter that people are just saying the word, sexist, racist, homophobic, transphobic, whatever, without knowing its actual meaning. But I know you're going to say that what Razer did was perpetuate the stereotype of gamers being toxic people. No, they weren't. Gamers do a pretty good job of doing that themselves. People got bent out of shape over the Sonic the Hedgehog's Twitter because of an attack helicopter joke which was being accused of making a transphobic joke, even though the question he was asked had nothing to do with gender identity. But because the words identify, as, attack, and helicopter were used, it caused the transgender SJWs to have a hissy fit. And that's really the whole thing about political correctness. All that political correctness is about is cleaning things up to get rid of things deemed ugly, but it only creates a false sense of paradise, which in turn fits in with neoliberalism, allowing anything to be sold, using political correctness for their own game. You often find that SJWs like Anita Sarkeesian, Brianna Wu, and Zarna Joshi have things like Patreon or a method of which you can donate money to them. They complain about social injustice brought on by politically incorrect people, and then in turn ask you to donate money to their cause to make things politically correct. They're essentially making social acceptance and multiculturalism more of a brand, because it's easier to make money off of a brand than actually making strives for social changes, which in turn, when you give them money, you feel like you're doing something positive, when in reality, you're just buying into their brand. It's a token gesture. That's exactly that, a token gesture. Slavoj Žižek, a Slovenian philosopher, says that modern political movements are more dangerous than they were in the past, because they're more friendly looking. It's harder to hate them because they appear to be more friendly and likable than a dictator. Žižek also says that political correctness is just a form of self-discipline, and that it doesn't actually allow you to overcome things like racism, sexism, or whatever. All it does is cover the ugliness of reality, resulting in the self-gratification that social justice awards. He goes on to say that political correctness is about changing things all the time, so that globally, nothing changes. We actually see that happen too. Anita Sarkeesian smiles, talks positively, and puts out a very friendly image. However, it's an obvious disguise, as when you look into what she's actually saying, it's very anti-men and sexist against men. But it's easier to get behind her as the facade she puts on is more welcoming than that, say, of a male white YouTuber who's angry that Anita is being sexist, and only using that not only for financial gain, but to try and make the world a better place just for herself and no one else. And on the subject of changing everything constantly so nothing will change, Anita has said that she'd like to see a girl version of Link, when the first rounds of Link from Breath of the Wild was being shown and people thought he was a girl. And then when Nintendo introduced Linkle, a female version of Link, Sarkeesian criticized Nintendo for making Link into a Miss Man character, which is her saying that Nintendo making a female version of a character is lazy because underneath, Linkle is still just a male character as she wasn't originally female to begin with. So even when social justice warriors get the inclusion they want, they still complain because that inclusion was due to either the pressure they inflicted to the game developers, so therefore the changes they wanted and got don't actually count in their books, or they stopped caring and moved on to something else, only looking back on previous efforts with dismissal. And when you look at all these social justice warriors, you can see that they are predominantly upper middle class white people. French philosopher Jean Bouliard says that other people's destitutions become an adventure playground for what's called charity cannibalism, where people are continually seeking to secure the conditions and reproduction of a catastrophe market. So when there's nothing to feel bad about, they start creating their own problems. Does that sound familiar? That sounds very much like this current generation of feminists. They're creating problems so that they can pretend to fix them for people who may not have cared, weren't bothered by it at all, or just didn't want their help. And when they can't find those victims that suit their narrative, they look for ones that do. And because of this, the protector-victim dynamic only continues to disempower the victim because they only become validated by their helplessness as it continues to empower the protector. We see this a lot in Anita's videos, or when she and Zoe Quinn were at the UN. They were trying to speak for all women about online harassment, which is everyone's problem, male, female, and transgender. But what they were doing is making all women feel like victims to make themselves feel empowered, which is why it's my opinion that Anita was using Zoe Quinn to push her agenda. Because Quinn was a victim, she was a prime candidate. She's only useful to Anita because of her own supposed helplessness. Anita didn't have to cry wolf to get attention. She had someone who was unjustly harassed. And yes, I feel that Zoe Quinn was unjustly harassed, because it's no one's business who she has sex with. And if you're going to bring up the ethics in game journalism, then that's still not on her. That's on the journalist she slept with for compromising their journalistic integrity. This type of intolerance is more destructive, because we accept people as long as they are useful to whatever cause it is that they're trying to push. Never mind that Sarkeesian hasn't fulfilled her Kickstarter promises, claimed that she was a gamer and loved video games, but then caught on a video saying that she wasn't, and never mind that she's sexist. Let's give her all the positive media attention we can give her, because it sells. It drives ratings. And now that she's no longer the flavor of the month, no one cares about her anymore because her brand of social justice is no longer marketable. Same with that Crash Override movie that was based on Zoe Quinn's book of the same name. It just stopped being marketable. And that's the key word here, marketable. Anita posted a video asking for donations to her 501c3 nonprofit organization to help combat the quote-unquote aggression people are facing due to Trump being elected president. Granted, some of the more viral ones were proven to be made up by the people that claim they were victims because they actually weren't. She heavily uses buzzwords to get people to donate to her organization by making them feel guilty. She's marketing social justice and feminism. It's like when you go to a store and the checkout checkout clerk asks if you like to donate to a charity that the store is backing. So that way you get the self-satisfaction of helping a cause without actually doing anything, so you feel good about yourself. However, her organization of feminist frequency hasn't done anything to actually help anyone. All they do is make videos, which is a form of doing nothing. I've heard that she uses the money she gets to fund the Crash Override Network, which from what I've heard, I mean, it could be fake, I don't know, but I have heard that it doesn't help anyone except for the people who run it or are in their little circle of friends. Again, I heard that it's a rumor, don't quote me on it. Because social justice puts on such a friendly face, it's easier to market and make money from it. Remember the Ice Bucket Challenge, where most of the money just went to the promotion of awareness for ALS, aka Lou Gehrig's disease, while the rest of the money raised, about 25%, went into the pockets of the big pharmaceutical companies? What Anita and her band of SJWs do is the same thing. Because all they do is make videos or she goes and gives speeches about her opinions, which she likes to parade around as facts, when they are just in fact her opinions, and maybe not even her opinions because she just parrots what she hears. And agrees with. We have the social justice warriors that would rather live in a bubble where bad things don't happen and bad things of the past never existed. Buying into political correctness is about making themselves feel good, so it's just them being narcissistic to protect their own sense of self-worth. But at the same time, they want to be the victims because they can profit from that. And what's really hypocritical is that if you're not buying into their brand of social justice, then you're doing it wrong and you're against them regardless if you're on their side but on a position that's lateral to theirs. Which, if you think about it, is bigotry. These social justice warriors are just hypocritical bigots because they want you to respect their opinions, yet they won't respect yours. This fits in with what I've been saying the whole time, that the game industry doesn't need to change because of the change already occurring. Well, already has occurred, but I'll get into that later. I think that Anita figured out that her crusade about tropes and women in games eventually became a fool's errand, because she's ended or in the process of ending it. And why is that, you may ask? Because talking about video games is no longer marketable for her. If you look at the views her videos get now, it's like someone pulled the plug on her channel. No longer getting the hundreds of thousands to maybe millions of views, but now starting to decline to the low 10,000s of views. Sure, her video game reviews get more, but not like they used to. And recently, with the 2016 election, Seth MacFarlane of Family Guy said that while it's going to be an unpopular observation, and it's one that he's not so sure he subscribes to himself, he said, and I'm paraphrasing, that the left extremists have been so far up their own asses, exploding at verbal missteps, accidental innuendos, tasteless tweets, all for attention, and when the real inequality came up, no one listened to them because they cried wolf too many times. Those extremists, the social justice warriors, the regressive left, all those people that bitch and moan about pointless shit in the name of equality or social justice have hurt their own stances so much because they cried wolf at every single chance they got, and now no one is listening to them. Like Zarna Joshi, for instance, who shoved a camera in a guy's face and asked what his name was. When he asked why, she didn't explain and said that she just wanted his name. And then he said Hugh. And then she asked for his last name and he said Mungus. Then she went on a screaming rampage saying that he sexually harassed her. And then afterwards on her Facebook, she was saying that he sexually assaulted her, when her own video that she posted on her own Facebook shows that he didn't and he just walked off. Obviously, she's hurting her own stance because she looks like a ranting, raving lunatic. Or what about Justine Sacco, who made an off-color joke about going to Africa and hoping that she doesn't get AIDS? People contacted her employer, got her fired, and dismantled her life in the 8 hours she was up in the air. They even got to the airport to take pictures of her to blast her on social media. And these are the people that like to preach tolerance? Yeah, destroying someone's life in the name of social justice is a totally tolerant thing to do when a joke is made. As if no one on the planet has made a tasteless off-color joke or laughed at one. It's that type of mentality, that entitled, spoiled brat mentality that a lot of parents in school systems have implemented, where everyone is a special snowflake, and if someone disagrees with them, they can retreat in their safe space, hug box, echo chamber, where they can have the wounds their ego received licked for them. because we only care about a child's confidence, falsely inflating it so it can't hold itself up once the air is let out of it, which is probably one of the reasons why Donald Trump won. The extreme social justice warriors pushed out people that were on their side. These are people that had so much confidence that Hillary Clinton would win that they didn't even vote for her. And when she lost, some universities had counseling for those that voted or supported her. These are people who probably got a participation trophies in sports when they were in school and therefore have no real coping mechanism when things don't go their way. But I do have to swing this pendulum back the other way. When Blizzard decided to switch out Tracer's butt pose victory, gamers flipped their shit, crying about censorship in games because a person on the forums, who I think was a woman, I'm not sure, commented on the pose not being in Tracer's personality, saying that it was too sexy for her and therefore didn't go with her spunky personality. Even Blizzard said they didn't really like the pose and decided to change it, but gamers still complained about social justice warriors making Blizzard buckle under pressure. But the thing was, the person who commented on it had no issue with Widowmaker from what I read, or from what I can remember. Because, and I hope I'm remembering this correctly, that person said that showing off Widowmaker's sexiness actually fits her personality, being that cold-blooded femme fatale type of character. And the thing is, Widowmaker's outfit not only shows the contours of her butt, but also has her boobs practically hanging out. And no one has a problem with that because it fits her character. But Tracer's butt pose just didn't. And I agree with that. Tracer showing off her butt didn't really fit her very lively, spunky, happy-go-lucky personality. Or in a recent Baldur's Gate expansion, or at least I think it was Baldur's Gate, correct me if I'm wrong, they added in dialogue about a character who was transgender. Gamers tossing their proverbial cookies about social justice warrior rhetoric. But the thing was, you had to keep asking questions and follow a specific dialogue tree to actually get to that discovery. It wasn't a big deal at all. Even the writer ran with all the backlash, trolling people and saying that she would do it again just to piss off more people or something like that. And then there's Virginia, a game that I've still yet to play and probably won't because I'm not really into those types of games, where gamers were saying things that it was a social justice warrior game, Tumblr the video game, or to get the social justice warrior bullshit out of their games. The thing is, the only SJWs that were putting Virginia on a pedestal was Polygon, because it's Polygon. And the funny thing is, these are the very same gamers who complain about social justice warrior nonsense being injected into games, and often say that those people should just go and make their own game. And when they do, they go and bash it for being a social justice warrior game, which I don't think Virginia even is. Which has the rest of us questioning what exactly is their problem when people go and make their own game with SJW rhetoric, even though, like I said, I don't think Virginia has it. I think it's a sense of entitlement. Like the video game industry is their own private ball that they're going to take home because things aren't going their way. And these types of gamers have the exact same attitude as the SJWs, just on the opposite side of the spectrum. Where the social justice warriors cry about whatever it is that they're going to cry about that isn't there, there's gamers that cry about censorship when it isn't there, leading them to be taken advantage of. When Team Ninja said they weren't bringing Dead or Alive Beach Volleyball 3 to the States and blame SJWs, of course, gamers protested and ported copies. However, it was obviously a marketing ploy. PlayAsia said that they had gamers covered, leading gamers to buy a game that they probably would not have bought because it was their own way of protesting. But it doesn't really matter. The interest in the Extreme Beach Volleyball spin-off series has declined significantly because it's stupid to pay $60 to look at 3D anime girls with huge boobs and bikinis when you can look at real women with huge boobs naked on the internet for free. The gamers who react in a way of such a vitriol manner only hurt their own stances, just like the SJWs who are on the opposite side, also hurting their own stances. But the obscene reactions that gamers give them turns them into the wolves that the SJWs are crying about, which is why I said to ignore them and they will go away. It may take a while, but they will, and it's because there's no wolves around for them to cry about, and everyone will stop taking them seriously, just like how they're not taken seriously now. There's always a constructive way of dealing with SJWs, and you do it by being calm and reiterating the facts. like how the increase of video game popularity has corresponded with a decrease in violent crimes. So if games don't cause people to become violent, why or how would they cause things like racism or misogyny? When we were kids, or if you are a kid and you're being picked on, or if you're being trolled or whatever, you're constantly told not to react in the way that they want you to, because they'll keep going. The same logic applies here. If you harass a social justice warrior, they keep going and getting media attention, and it continues to make you look bad. Which is why I've said that you need to either ignore them or deal with them constructively, because doing that gives them no power and takes away from their power, which is why you never see them take place in any debates with their critics. Do I support the gamers who get angry and therefore insult, threaten, or try to dismantle the lives of social justice warriors? No, I do not. Do I understand it though? Yes, I do, because for many years gaming has been under constant scrutiny by political leaders like Leland Yee, who was against violent video games and a strong supporter of gun control, and is now, in a karma-like fashion, in jail for gun trafficking, racketeering, corruption, and money laundering. They're tired of religious people saying that games are the way of the devil. I think it was the 700 Club or some religious show that said that Pokemon was making demons friendly to children. But it's funny once you realize that Yokai Watch is closer to that interpretation they gave Pokemon, or how Dungeons & Dragons is a satanic game because of magic. I've dealt with that crap before personally. My friends and I would play Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic the Gathering during study halls in high school. Every teacher was cool with it. Even the principal was cool with it and was even interested in the mechanics of the games. But there was one super religious teacher that would tell us to stop because she saw the games as satanic. Do I think that the games industry is underserving women? That's subjective because I think the game industry has been making strides to serve women. Do I think that change is needed to be done to correct that? No, because I know that the industry will change to cater to women and that it doesn't need to be forced or guilted into doing so. Because the harder you push, the harder there will be push back. Because the gaming market is already making its way in that direction. Back when Nintendo released the Nintendo Entertainment System here in America, it was marketed as a toy for boys, because that's what their marketing research pointed to. And since then, the game industry was on that path. And before the video game crash, games were marketed towards everyone. But afterwards, they were marketed towards males, and I won't deny that. And the game industry is still sort of heading that way. However, the game industry continually does its market research, which studies show that women are more apt to play mobile games on their phone because men are more likely to play on console or PC. But the game industry will continually redo itself to remain profitable. Just look at how Lara Croft has changed. She no longer wears short shorts that snake up her butt or low-cut tops that show off her cleavage. The new Lara wears clothes that a regular woman would wear, making it so that she's no longer the sex symbol she used to be. I feel that the market will change on its own for it to fit its own needs for it to be prosperous. But forcing it to change and change it radically before the market is ready will result in regular consumers pushing back against that change. Not because they're not ready to accept that change, granted that can be a factor too, and I won't deny that. But it's also because they oppose the extreme ideals the SJWs hold themselves to, although they really don't hold themselves to their own ideals. But gamers don't see it as equality, but preferential treatment, hypocrisy, and the fact that they actually aren't interested in their cause of changing things to make the world a better place. They only want to make themselves more comfortable. And that opposition could also hold the market back where it does need legitimate change. Which circles back to the whole thing about things changing all the time so that nothing changes. And that's what gets me really angry. Because everyone is being so self-centered that they don't care about the ramifications of them wanting things censored or changed. Because they personally don't approve of it. They're saying that because they don't like something and don't want to see it or don't want it changed, that no one else should see it or wouldn't want it changed either. No, if you don't like something or find something offensive or whatever triggered you, you have every right to get up and walk away. You have no right to dictate what is and is not approved content based on your personal preferences. You don't like something? Walk away. Don't give them your business because more than likely they didn't want it in the first place if you don't like it. The crusade for people to take their safe spaces wherever they go is ridiculous. And I'm saying this to both sides when it comes to your safe space. If you don't want to be triggered, don't go outside. Don't go on the internet. Don't watch TV. Don't read anything. Just do the world a favor and go live in a cave because no matter what, the world will still turn. Not everything needs to be a political issue. There's no need to stand up for the rights of imaginary characters. But yet this seems to be the world we live in now. Fictional women need to be protected from men, while real women in countries where they're still considered property continue to suffer, and that's okay because it's their culture of that country and we're supposed to respect that apparently. I often question what happened to this world. I'm not one of those types of people that tries to glorify the past as what people describe as the good old days, because there really weren't good old days, and they're only glorifying the good moments or the moments they've been told were good by the media. The world has always been a horrible place. And I think it's just that intolerance, prejudice, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, or whatever have just been disguised as tolerance, acceptance, and political correctness. I've seen people of color hate other people of color yet claim that they're not racist because they're a person of color. I've seen transgender people say that anyone that isn't transgender is transphobic just because they identify with the gender that they were born with. I've seen Christians, people who are of a religion that's supposed to teach love and acceptance, spew hatred yet claim to be good Christians. I've seen feminists let man-hating bile ooze from every pore of their body but cry misogyny when called out on it. There's non-Muslim people that put Islamic extremists on pedestals when they're gunned down by a white cop after they killed a bunch of innocent people. The only solution I have for this is that it'll eventually run its course. If its bubble hasn't burst yet, it's going to. People are getting tired of being labeled as things they're not. They're tired of these people crying wolf over non-issues, and tired of seeing these people glorify negative actions as if they're a martyr. Gamers are tired of the stigma that they get from playing games, as people who don't play games like to invent some new way to shame them. People like Anita Sarkeesian are bullies, plain and simple. But they're the worst kind of bullies. Because when you retaliate, they put on a smile and kiss ass as they deny they did anything wrong, and get special treatment while you're left to sit in the corner for lying because all they were doing was trying to get you in trouble so this way they could be the victim. And to wrap this up, because this video is now over 2 hours, this social justice warrior regressive left nonsense, and that's what it is, nonsense, is a fad that will eventually stop in the near future. The social justice warriors and regressive leftists are essentially this generation's hippie movement, only that it will accomplish less what the hippies did in the 60s, and accomplishing less than nothing isn't something to be proud of. So put that participation trophy down. You didn't earn squat. Didn't earn squat. Didn't